I'm going to guess that, yeah, this is the same thing you sent me last night. Oh, I have paperwork here. Well, hi everybody. I'm Kenneth Adams, just as a reminder, your chair. And thanks for coming to our new location. People will recall that when we met last time, we were over at Brick on Fulton Street, and we had a tough time getting the AV set up for the video cast, the webcast. And that's a requirement under our open meetings law in the state. And so we're here at the Department of Labor. Thank you, Rachel Gold and Mario Mussolino, acting commissioner, and other colleagues at the State Department of Labor, because this facility, as you all can tell, is hooked up so we can do the webcast. So, and it's reasonably close to the project site, and I hope people found it convenient. And the sun is shining, and I don't need my umbrella. And so we can get started. Anyway, thank you all for coming, and thank you again to the Department of Labor and to Rachel for hosting us. I will now call to order the meeting of the directors of the Atlantic Yards Community Development Corporation for Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. Again, I'm Kenneth Adams. I want to take this opportunity to thank Rachel and the Department of Labor for hosting our meeting today. We're very grateful for the use of this space. As I've noted, I'd like to note for the record, Regina, as our stenographer this afternoon, that the meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free, of course, to ask questions at any time. Consistent with the policy of our parent corporation, Empire State Development, we welcome public comment on the items on today's agenda. After each item is presented and any comments are received from the directors, we'll allow members of the public to provide comments. Bless you. All comments should be limited, please, to about 2 minutes and should address the item that's under consideration at that time. You will note that the final item on our agenda is a section we just call public comments. So at that time, we'll have an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments on non-agenda related matters. So a good time to bring up, other items, topics about the project that are not on today's agenda. We'll do that at the end. Before we begin with the substantive portion of the meeting, I'd like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on today's agenda. This is a question we always ask at the onset of these meetings, is to check for this in advance. And if so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. We will then be sure that you may recuse yourself or yourselves from any discussion or vote with regard to such item or items. So again, this is an early in the meeting a step we like to take just to see if anyone anticipates that they might have a conflict of interest with any of the items on the agenda. Any such conflicts or concerns? All right. The foregoing having been noted for the record, I'd also like to note that as a follow-up to the March 23rd board meeting, our last meeting, the one I said we had over at Brick, the directors received a tech memo explaining the noise control measures prescribed in the final environmental impact statement, the FEIS, and noise attenuating properties of double pane or double glazed windows. This is just a reference to discussions we had at the last meeting. Folks will recall some of them by directors, some questions brought up by members of the public about both the engineering issues and the qualifications for getting the double glazed windows and the whole program to such windows. And everyone should have received, I guess a few days ago, maybe it was Friday, an email with a document that was in response to those questions, and it was 110 pages. I'll confess, I looked at sections of it that I was curious about. But it was a whole lot of different. I just want to make sure directors got that email and took a good look at it. And of course, you need more time. That's understandable. But also, that is all available. It's all public information. Marion, it's on our website, right?
It goes up after the meeting.
Oh, it goes up after today. Okay. So for people from the public who raised those questions, again, I wanted to make it clear that the staff pulled together all that information, put it into this big set of documents, and directors have seen it, and then everybody can see it after the meeting. It'll go up on our website. And that's important because those were a lot of very timely questions and concerns. I think there were a couple of other issues there. We're going to talk about some of them this afternoon. For example, directors had asked questions, as had members of the public, about the 16-foot construction fence around block 1129. Remember last meeting we spent a lot of time talking about the height of that fence, its location in the street or with respect to the buildings behind it. And so the directors have been provided with a memo explaining the MEC requirements and the justification for that fence. And later on in our meeting, in fact, and I see Jane Marshall is here. Hi, Jane. We'll have some presentations from Forest City and others on the fence and on activity that's going on behind the fence. We will also have, in response to questions and comments by directors at our last meeting, a presentation on the Barclays Center Arena Operation and Events Protocol. So those are some of the things, again, we're teeing up for our discussion and review this afternoon, much of that in response to issues raised by the public and by directors at our meeting last time. I was going to say last month, but it was really March. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the directors' meeting of February 6th. Now, you'll note that's February 6th, not our March meeting. I hope directors have had a chance to take a gander at the minutes. But what Debbie Royce is our corporate secretary, organizes these meetings, but does that for a lot of different boards and functions at ESD. And Debbie's assured me that for our next, we're going to have a meeting in June, and for the next month, and for the June meeting, we'll be caught up with our minutes. So because we're actually a meeting behind. Apologies for that. But we'll get caught up by June with respect to the minutes. In any case, with respect to these minutes from the February 6th meeting, the draft that you've seen, are there any questions or comments, additions or deletions? Any directors have anything to note on the minutes? Everybody okay? If not, I'll entertain, please, a motion for approval.
I'll move.
Rachel, thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries, and therefore the minutes are approved. I'm going to turn the program over to Marion Phillips, our president. He's going to provide us with his president's report, and I think he'll call on several people to help him get through the report in terms of different items he's going to discuss. This is informational, and there's no vote that's required. So we'll turn it over to Marion. Now, before doing that, I was looking for a moment where this would be appropriate, but I think it's always helpful to go around the table and reintroduce ourselves because we don't see ourselves all that often, and it's nice to know who's in the room. We do have a couple of people who noted their absence. But again, I'm Kenneth Adams, your chairman. I'm the acting commissioner of the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. Walked over here, someone noted, with my umbrella from Metrotech, where we have a big office, so my commute was, I didn't come 160 miles from Albany today. I just came from around the corner. Rachel?
Rachel Gold. I am a deputy commissioner and special counsel at the Labor Department and a resident of the area. And my office is over on Bond Street.
So this is convenient for you,
So this was
too.
even, yes, very convenient for me, too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Liz Harris, Assistant Deputy Secretary for Food and Agriculture in the Governor's Office.
Assistant Deputy Secretary for Food and Agriculture in the Governor's Office.
And I live in the neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Regina, is it hard because there's some sound coming behind? Do you want to take a moment to move? If it's hard for you to hear because of the voices on that
Deb
screen.
did say this, I thought it would be better, okay.
Up to you. Whatever's easiest for you. But I'm noticing there's some people talking behind the screen, and it could be a little disconcerting to Regina. Pardon me?
I'm sorry.
Whatever, Regina, is good for you, seriously.
That
Wherever.
was fine.
And if that doesn't work, you can move again.
Yeah, just let us know when to stop.
The Department of Labor is a very accommodating place. Federally sponsored furniture, wallpaper,
Brand new
air
facility.
conditioning.
Brand new building, practically.
All right. Liz, thank you. Let's get Regina settled. Let us know when you're back in action. Good to go. All right.
My name is Linda Reardon. I'm a resident of Prospect Heights, and I'm the Assemblyman's appointee to the board.
Linda Reardon.
Jamie Stein of Pratt Institute, the mayoral appointment to the board.
Marion Phillips, the president of AYCDC.
Robin Stout, ESD Senior Counsel.
Toby Jaisimi, AYCDC Director.
Sam Filler, Empire State Development Project Manager.
Bertha Lewis, Black Institute, Borough President, Adams, person,
Appointee.
whatever. I don't know.
Sent you here, huh?
Puppet.
Tamara McCaw, Governor appointment, Clinton Hill resident, work at the Brooklyn Academy of Music.
I'm Julian Beckford. I'm an Associate Counsel with Empire State Development, and I'm a resident of Clinton Hill and a gubernatorial appointee.
Sean Austin. I am a Senior Vice President of Liberty Mutual Insurance Group. I'm a governor's appointee and a resident of Prospect Leopards Gardens.
Thank you. And again, thanks everyone for joining us. So Marion, let's turn it over to you for your report.
Thank you. First, Mr. Adams, I think it's appropriate to welcome Jolene back. She has a new title, one that's far more important than the titles that she spouted. She's a mother for the first time, which I'm sure is far more exciting than the other stuff you said.
A lot harder.
That's why she missed the meeting.
Yeah, she had a pretty good excuse, that first one. Gave birth 4 days after the baby was born or something, or after our meeting. So the President's report, I'm going to give a quick outline of what I'm going to cover, or what we're going to cover, after which the appropriate team member will explain that portion of the report. The report has about 3 or 4 components. Kenneth already spoke to the 110 pages that you received as a follow-up from the previous meeting. Also, there will be a calendar of events. As Kenneth mentioned, a June meeting. I'll update you on what that status is and the progression we're going to take related to open space. Then Nicole will come forward and talk about, you raised many questions about how the log's kept, the metrics for the log, the closure rate of the log, how do we process the log. Also, an update from the last community update meeting. I don't want to say minutes, but just highlights of that meeting that occurred last week. As you know, what we do is before this meeting, week to 10 days out, we have a community meeting and we report to you what occurred at that meeting. Also at that meeting, items that are raised or concerns or complaints are added to the incident log as well. Then Sam will come and talk about another community portal. We discussed in more than one occasion individually or collectively about this problem of multiple entry points of complaints from the community. How can we make it one entry point? So Sam will discuss that. And then Greenland Forest City will come and give a presentation. Has about 3 parts to it, if I remember correctly. One is just the project update, where they are. 2, the MPT on 1129. And then 3, an MPT on B3, which is the upcoming building, which is on the arena block. Then the 4th component will be about Barclays events, which these were some concerns that you raised at the last meeting. In terms of what's in the 108 pages, I assume most of you had a chance to scan it, and I think Kenneth highlighted actually all of my notes, so I won't go over that, but tech memo, MEC, etc. Calendar of events, as Sam will discuss in greater detail about the community portal, community app. There will be a meeting next Tuesday, the 26th at 55 Hanson to allow community input. As directors, if you would like to participate in the development of the RFP, the procurement necessary that will go out after that, we'll definitely speak to Toby and we'll make time so that we can get input from you as well. The goal is to have community input on how this app could best serve and meet the need of their concerns, how we can get these concerns in, get them distributed to the appropriate agency or indoor party. And so that meeting's next Tuesday at 55 Hanson.
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. I got a lot of meetings on my schedule. Next Wednesday, 5:30. Thank you, Wayne. Next Wednesday at 5:30. My meeting on the 26th, I know what that is as well, at 5:30 on the 27th at 55 Hanson. And then Kenneth mentioned a June meeting. The June meeting is going to be about the open space on the project. As you know, it's a 22-acre project, 7 to 8 acres. I believe it's 8 acres exactly about open space. That will be discussed. There are 3 components to that discussion. The first component is May 26th, right? That will be a staff component where our Greenland Forest City will discuss and present to ESD staff and the city staff. We believe that it's a non-material change in their presentation, and we expect to be updated on how to proceed with this project, that portion of the project. The following meeting after that will be a meeting with the community to make that presentation after our input. We will go through the design guidelines based on what we've had preliminarily and make sure there's a comparison what was originally put together, where they are, and go and meet the design guidelines. There'll be a presentation to the community, get input from the community, followed by a meeting of the directors to present to you. Again, we believe these changes are non-material. However, we will see the presentation, have input, and make sure they follow design guidelines.
Excuse me, what's the date on the, for the community response meeting?
We have not set that date yet. The date's going to be set once we receive our,
Thank you.
once we receive our presentation next week to determine how much time we need to respond. So what I would like to do is, if there are any questions related to the packet, there is staff here who can answer those questions. We'd like to discuss that now. If not, we'll let Sam and Nicole and Sam make their presentations, followed by Forest City. But I did not want to get so far down and try to backtrack. So if there are questions related to the previous meeting and the documents that you received, if you have questions now, we have a person here from AKRF who wrote part of the tech memo, who can also speak to some of the questions related to the 16-foot fence. You want to come take my seat? Or... Oh, really?
What, Marion, maybe we should, unless, Jamie, you have a question now?
I do. I mean, I want to just say that it is a lot of material and some of it's very dense, so I've had a little bit of difficulty, but like right off the bat, I do have a few questions. Is this an appropriate time for that? I mean, they're not the most informed questions, I guess is what I'm saying, but I do have...
There's two ways to do it. One is we could spend some time on this now, or we could have the other presentations and then just have a general, discussion session when all the presentations are done. But I'm open to whatever people want to do. Do other people have questions on the material that went out? Or just Jamie?
They might be simple.
Okay.
Well, do you mind if I...
Who do we have here, Marion, to respond?
Marco Bettamarco?
We have Dan
Dan Bettamarco.
who wrote the two texts.
So Dan and Rachel, why don't you come sit somewhere, not just don't block the camera. And Jamie, fire away. And maybe as you ask your questions, others will be inspired to ask questions too. And let me just say, this is not, because it's a lot of material and it went out late, this is not like the last time to ask your questions, right? Jamie's got some and that's great.
Okay.
But we can, continue this later and or at a future meeting. So, and needless to say, even between meetings, right? If you have questions about the material, you could, Toby or Marion could direct you to the consultants to get your answers.
Great, thank you.
We won't limit it to this.
Okay, thank you. My first question is about the map of eligible sound attenuation properties. Can you speak to how that was created and then maybe point to if we have information on how that was created?
Sure. So the SEIS construction noise chapter, just goes through it in detail, but ultimately it's based from that. And that noise analysis from the SEIS considered 3 possible construction phasing plans. And so then it has sort of 3 independent sets of results. But ultimately, we're saying anyone who might have experienced an impact under any of those plans is eligible. So this map collects everything into one map. So any place that shows up in any of the impact maps from the SEIS is all sort of aggregated into this one map. And it's sort of limited into 2 dimensions because it is a map, but the noise analysis considered each floor independently. So there's also a table that's sort of, so if something's highlighted in red there, sometimes it means every floor of that building facade is impacted and is therefore eligible for window improvement or storm windows. But sometimes it's just select floors, and so the table sort of does that 3rd dimension.
Oh, there's an accompanying table?
Yes, there should be.
Okay.
It's
For each building?
Different
For
memo.
each building?
Different memo.
Okay, I think I see it here. Sorry, forgive me. Got it. Okay. Great, thank you. Second question is about, and maybe this isn't the most appropriate for now, but the outreach to eligible tenants and how that happens.
Good question.
Actually, I'm going
Rachel?
to, that is something that Forest City is responsible for. So if Jane can speak to how they conducted it this last round.
We sent certified mail letters and we follow up with email and knock on wood, stuff like that. And we are currently updating a tracking list that was created way back in like 2007 when we first went and did this. So we initiate outreach when there's a new area or site of construction. So for example, block 1129 was the most recent. So we are sort of trying to update a matrix that shows where we are with each of the individual properties, and then so it's owners, then tenants, because if an owner says don't touch my building or don't do anything, we can't. So first owners, then tenants, and we are using the external affairs division really to do this because it's more of an outreach and trying to capture what it is we need to mitigate in the community. And so there was a historical aspect of it, which is lots of mitigation was done in the past because of the arena construction and then whatever else was rolling in. And now there's block 1129. So I think since January, we've been sort of tracking it. And I actually haven't been the person principally involved in it, so I'm probably missing detail. And when I followed up with Rachel about this, because I was at the last CDC meeting, so I heard the question, I said to her that we should really figure out what kind of tracking matrix we think can be understood, because you can put a lot of detail in things that isn't necessary and can be confusing.
And there's two different things. It's windows and air conditioner units.
And it's not necessarily.
It's not like because you get one, you get the other.
Right. And originally, just so you know, we did a very comprehensive building survey, which looked at what buildings get windows and what buildings are in the zone of air conditioning. And also since the SEIS, the mitigation has actually changed a bit because it requires more additional floors, and it looked at analysis in the SEIS, which is completely different from the analysis in the FEIS. So that affected how we implement the plan. So we've been trying to sort of catch up.
Yeah, it sounds very complicated.
It is complicated.
Okay.
And once they've got all of that collated together, we will be looking at that with our mitigation monitor. So there could be changes made to that tracking just to improve it and improve the process.
Okay. And so the Forest City Ratner is outreaching and then going back and checking, and so the mechanism.
What we've done is, and we're trying to develop the right system on, make sure that we are tracking everybody.
Okay.
So I'm not so sure it's perfect yet, but that is what we're doing.
Exactly
exactly what you said is what we're doing.
Okay, because I just know historically it seems like issues of noise and noise attenuation are things that keep coming up. So our last meeting we spoke about performance metrics and how we arrive at a space to know that these quality of life concerns are being addressed. So,
well, so long as they are eligible for the mitigation, the important thing, once that's established, is to get them on that list.
Yeah,
and follow up.
And help folks understand if they are eligible. And okay, thank you. The next question is about the 16-foot fence. Great. Can you just explain for us, the description from what I've read talks about, I think, buildings 11, 12, and 13. Is that, I'm a little confused about, I know that there's some, like if we sort of look at a visual, like if construction is happening over here, noise attenuation with a 16-foot fence may not work, but, so can you explain to us a little bit this notion of where construction is happening and how that fence changes over time, or its placement?
The fence doesn't change.
Okay.
The analysis that we had conducted for the memo was looking just at the properties along Dean Street that would be affected by the fence that went around 1129.
Well, I believe actually we considered properties even further away, but it's
Yes.
only Dean Street who's
Really
really
affected by the
by that.
change.
Because the sort of the isolated change we were looking at was just that, the height of the fence on that block being 16 feet versus an actual 8 feet. And so essentially the properties right across Dean Street are the ones who have like a real appreciable difference in noise level, the amount of construction noise based on the height of that. And the lower you are, the more it affects you. So even if you're the second floor, the second floor is really the biggest difference, because an 8-foot fence does not block your line of sight to the construction site if you're on the second floor, but a 16-foot fence does. But even the third and higher floors, they do matter, because a lot of construction staging happens right along the street, which is closest to the fence. So it's sort of right in the shadow, acoustical shadow of that fence. It's close up to the fence, so it really provides more shielding for even higher up windows. Not that the buildings on Dean Street there are very tall, but the lower you are, the more it helps. But basically everybody on Dean Street has a difference in noise level based on the height of that fence.
Okay, so this particular memo is just focused on noise attenuation for residents on Dean Street.
Well, no, the memo considered the difference in noise really throughout the study area, but it only matters across Dean Street, because we're only looking at the height of the fence on that block along Dean Street.
Okay, I think I need to read a little bit more for further.
Oh, Jamie, that's fine, and save questions, come up with more for later or for, another session, or again, just to get on the phone with Rachel or the staff, and I, encourage everybody to do the same. It was a lot of information, and it came late, so, apologies for that, but definitely continue to ask those questions. Then Marion, that was a helpful aside. Do you want to turn it back over to?
So Nicole, let's go ahead and do the community report.
Great.
Nicole Jordan. So on May 12, 2015, ESD and Greenland Forest City Partners held its bi-monthly community update meeting, formerly known as Quality of Life, at 55 Hanson Place near the project site. The purpose of the meeting is threefold. It's one, to inform the community about upcoming construction activities. What was presented was 38 6th Avenue, known as B3 MPT. We did construction updates on Barclays Green Roof, West Portal, LIRR, 550 Vanderbilt Avenue, which is known as B11, 535 Carlton Avenue, which is B14, 38, as I said, 6th Avenue, which is B3, and 461 Dean Street, which is B2. Second, we inform the community about upcoming Barclays Arena activities. And third, we give residents the opportunity to ask questions and voice concerns about the project. A total of about 30 persons attended the meeting. Some of those names are on the presentation, including a number of representatives from elected official offices, community boards, New York City agencies, and 8 community organizations. The topics that were discussed during this meeting were as follows: requesting to fill potholes on Carlton Avenue, concerns regarding the volume and flow of traffic in the project area, requests for a traffic study to be performed by DOT, New York City DOT. Request for DOT to tour and meet with 78th Precinct and the Community Council President. Noise relating to traffic congestion. Trucks and buses on Carlton Avenue. Parking for 78th Precinct NYPD. Green roof crane removal questions. Information regarding condemnation of properties. Pedestrian safety concerns from Flatbush Avenue to Vanderbilt Avenue. FDNY concerns regarding cars and parking along 6th Avenue. Parking for new buildings, some questions about where they would park and things like that, and access to it. Questions on income bands for 38 6th Avenue, which is B3. Questions regarding affordable housing, questions like how many buildings, things like that. How do they get on the list? Current and displaced resident access to the new building. So once buildings are built, they had questions about how to displaced residents come back. Construction plans for B3, B2 completion date, crowds at Barclays, CBA questions for the developer, tree protection and guards on Dean Street and Carlton Avenue, the art on the construction fence or lack of art on the construction fence, notes and records from previous quality of life from former ESD staff, and there was a request for a vibration monitor from a resident at 560 Dean Street. ESD, Greenland Forest City Partners, and DOT responded to the many concerns that were raised and informed the community of additional responses, that additional responses will be provided where needed. All the materials from quality of life are posted to the website, so they're available at the ESD website. It's the esd.ny.gov/Atlantic Yards. ESD added those concerns through myself to the Atlantic Yards incidents log, which currently is looking into these issues. So I'll go to the log. The log is kept that you will receive. Toby Jysini will be sending you the updated log. The log is from January 1st of 2015 to 5/12, which was their quality of life. So that's when it ended. 5/12/15. ESD received up to that time 80 direct community incidents, concerns, or staff observations. So as I stated previously, we have an on-the-ground person. I myself am there twice a week, and we go out and we observe what's happening. ESD currently has a 94% closure rate on incidents reported to us directly. We have a 75% incident rate of incidents being closed within 48 to 72 hours. So what I mean by closure. So closure means either we have put it in the hands of the appropriate agency. There are things, DOT issues that we don't have, ESD is not responsible for, and yet we don't have the authority. That goes to DOT. So if it's a DOT issue, I make sure that it's handled by the appropriate person, and then it's considered closed from my log, and it becomes their jurisdiction. Close also means a resolution. So if there's something small that we can handle, or there's something that's inside of our envelope, then resolved and closed means we handled it, and I notified the appropriate person, and the appropriate person is the one who submitted the complaint or incident directly to me. There are currently, as of 5/12/15, 5 incidents that are logged with an open status. An open status means that it is still being investigated and it has not sought the resolution, or I have not found the appropriate person in that agency to take the complaint and handle it. Okay. Any questions?
Nicole, could I ask a question?
Yes.
Just could you go back and you have some of the statistics on the screen? You said that you go out twice a week, and we have a gentleman. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name. Who's
Greg Lynch.
Who is in the office there. Of the 80 incidents, how many come from your own observations, and how many come from folks calling you or emailing you in the community?
I don't have an exact number to give you, but I can give that to you, but it's quite a few. It's quite a few. So currently I have 5 open incidents. Out of those 5 open incidents, 3 of them are observations. They're observations from us, and those open incidents are observations and things that are out of our control. So there are other agencies that have to respond.
And then when you say it's closed because it's been taken over by another agency, how do we make sure that other agency does what it's supposed to do?
Track that.
So I follow up, and that's also in the log, so I follow up. So if you see in the previous log, you'll see in my responses, it'll say, spoke with the person on the date. It'll have the information inside the response column, followed up on this date, developer made a call, so all of that is inside. I keep that inside the response column so that I know the response that was made by the agency, by the developer, and by ESD.
Good. And I'm sorry, Bertha, you had a question, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Please.
it's all around. First of all, you said 80 direct. So what is the difference between direct and indirect, which is the first thing that you talk to, like what is the full basket? And secondly, when you are tracking you made a referral to DOT and you are tracking. So you said so-and-so called the person or whatever. That doesn't mean it's resolved. Do you track it to resolution? Is that agency reports to you in writing, this is what we did, and we've closed it out? Exactly how does this work?
Yes, I do follow it up with the agency. So I can give you an example of, let's see, what's the most recent one that I can think of off the top of my head. So Carlton Avenue. So there was major concerns because of the narrowness of Carlton Avenue. The wall was up. So I worked with DOT on that. Worked with DOT. We had meetings with the community. DOT and I went back and forth. We also met with the fire department to ease concerns or find out if they had any concerns about traffic and things of that nature. Now, that was nothing that ESD could do, but I worked with DOT and went to those meetings, and all of that information was then put in a log, so I knew how it was responded to, even though it was something that was out of our envelope.
And so you understood how it was responded to, which is great, because, you know, somebody needs to keep, you know, what's going on with these agencies, but we're talking about resolution so that it can close. Sometimes there is no resolution and there's nothing you can do to make someone happy, but it's one thing to track their response. It's another thing to say, okay, this complaint came in, this is the process that we went through, it has been resolved, or it is still.
In many instances, when Nicole speaks to directing it to an agency, in many instances, she may be shepherding the issue or setting up the meeting. So she really manages it soup to nuts, start to finish. And as you said, there are some issues we may not get to as quickly, but Nicole really manages it, the whole process, the whole step around.
But I don't know if it would be helpful or just a little more clear, Nicole, if you didn't use the term closed for what is really a referral.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right? Like a complaint that you quite appropriately referred to New York City DOT.
That's
Ms. Lewis's point, it's not really closed till it gets done. And so maybe in your statistics, we could look at what you can close yourself at the staff level, great. What goes to another agency that has jurisdiction, that's a referral. When it finally gets closed, then it gets closed. Right?
By them.
Excuse me.
By them,
You know, so,
because you're on top of it, presumably.
And so the other thing is this direct, direct. So what's the indirect? What are the other, how do you get other complaints that are not direct?
So indirect. So direct means I get them via email. So sometimes residents will email me and say, this is what's happening. Can you fix this? I'll get a phone call. Quality of life. I have weekly meetings with the Forest City Community Liaison. So sometimes they will receive an email or a complaint and they'll forward it to me and vice versa so that we can stay in a loop about what's happening, what concerns out there. So that's what I mean by direct. It directly comes to me. So indirect, sometimes I will get a call that comes with a complaint and someone will say, yeah, a lot of people are saying such and such, but those people never, I say, oh, have such and such call me. Those people never reach out. So the 80 complaints are what I get directly. There are people that call and say, yeah, this is happening, or such and such said this about, and when I ask to get a call or have them email me or send a notice, I never get it. So it becomes hearsay because I never receive anything.
Is your you do check it out.
Yeah, or Forest City, or Forest City. So we never see, we have meetings and discuss those different things.
Is your observation part of direct as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So when she says her observation is hers and Greg's.
Yes.
Nicole, I'm sorry, Ms. Liz, are you done? What are the two that are open that are from community members?
The two that are open, so there was a request for a vibration monitor from 560 Dean Street, and that was just Tuesday. That was at Quality of Life. The other one that is open was a request for a traffic study from DOT and a tour, and that tour hasn't been scheduled yet. So it's open. Thank you.
Why don't you explain what you and Greg do and how Greg manages when he does his tours and what he reviews and how it manages it? I mean, people should understand how that works.
Okay, sure. So Greg Lynch works with us, as I previously told you, he's on the ground 5 days a week, and he works from the satellite office, and I'm out 2 days a week. Greg's task is to walk the site. He walks the site multiple times a day. He also keeps an eye on what's happening out there from intersections. I mean, there are things that are out of our control. So they're DOT issues, they're parks issues, they're things that have nothing to do, we personally can't change it, but he takes notes. He observes, he finds out what's happening. He gives me a report daily of what he sees and things that are changing. So sometimes nothing's been happening. There's nothing happening here, or there was excess traffic there, or there were only 2 TEAs at this intersection and we expect one more. So it varies. And Greg does that multiple times a day.
And that's 9 to 5?
Yes.
And Greg, where's the office?
55 hands.
That's right. So everybody knows. Good. We'll come visit you. I'm sure you appreciate visitors. We don't want you to be lonely.
Is there an overall trend? I mean, are you getting more incidents as the days go by, or is it?
I'm getting less.
Okay.
Since I started, I'm getting less. Since Greg started 2 months ago, I'm getting less. For example, Dean Street. Dean Street, there was a lot of double parked cars, and there were constant incidents and things happening about cars being double parked. There's other construction happening within the footprint of the project as well. But I work with the precinct, so if Greg goes out there in the morning, he sees somebody double park, they don't move when they see his presence. His presence has definitely helped. People see him coming, and they know, oh, here it happens. They'll move their cars. If they don't move it, I call the precinct. I have Officer Laffey's number. I ask if he can send somebody out from the auto summons unit. They go out, they give tickets. So I have definitely seen a decrease in incidents.
It's called the auto summons unit.
Yeah. I believe that's what it's called, auto summons.
I don't like this. No, I'm just kidding. That's very helpful.
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions?
Wait a minute,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Plug in, I'm sorry.
The auto summons unit, because of Nicole, their income has increased.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody appreciates that. It's effective. Here comes the auto summons unit. Time to move.
That and parades.
While Regina gets reconnected there, Marion, what's the next? Let's just take a moment. Any further questions? And we won't answer them or anything yet because Regina's got to. But you have some. Okay, great. So let's think now of your questions for Nicole, or for Toby, or for Marion. But
so following
primarily Nicole, and then when Regina gets hooked up, we'll go live again.
So following the questions by Jamie, and then we'll go forward. Sam will present this portal.
The web app thing.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, because I'm probably the least informed of that, and it's very exciting. Everyone needs to hear about it. Regina, when you're ready, give us a signal. Jamie, your question.
Great, thank you. That's really wonderful presentation. Thank you, Nicole. I have some questions about, I see a few gaps. So the community update meetings gave you a long list of concerns. How are those being added to the log, or are they added to the log?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Yes, they are added to the log. Some of them overlap because we have categories, as you may have seen in the last meeting. So the categories I use from HDR, which is our environmental consultants. Mm-hmm. I took some of their categories, and then I also created a miscellaneous category as well to help. So there's dust, there's noise, there's trucks, queuing, idling, rodents, vibrations, and then miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is a huge category, but that includes if I get a complaint about Barclays, that goes into miscellaneous. If I get a complaint about garbage, that goes into miscellaneous. So that's how some of them become multiples, or they overlap.
Okay, so things that are raised in the community update meeting are addressed, but it may not necessarily be in real time. I'm trying to segue us a little bit to the discussion of the app, and then also just highlight that, there are all these different ways of getting quality of life concerns into a space, right?
And
so
those are direct,
these meetings,
right? When you go to the quality of life meeting. Right?
Yes.
Well,
so you're right, Jamie. They would not be in real time.
They happened 3 weeks ago. They're not direct. I mean, we're sort of stuck to a schedule of meetings in this particular scenario. So just in a,
I'm sorry. When you say stuck to a schedule of meetings, I don't. You correct me if I'm wrong. Does that impact the schedule of a meeting? Doesn't impact addressing the issues in between?
No,
correct?
no, it does not.
Mm-hmm.
Nor does it impact when they can file the complaint or raise the concern.
Okay. And then about 311 complaints complaints. I know last meeting we sort of talked about how it's hard for you to get all of that information together, and I think that that's a crucial consideration for this new app that we're going to talk about. So are you still sort of
311 is still, that's also because that's city and not state. It's the process, so we're still working with city to try to figure out exactly how to do that. And we have a call coming with them, with Sam, myself, and Marion, and the city as well, to discuss the app and other issues, so we can try to make sure it all works and flows together.
We discussed the 311 with the mayor's office. The problem is they're trying to sort out what's the best way to sort it, by zip code or by boundaries, and they're trying to create that based on how the calls come in. And hopefully they can come to that sorting or coding, at which point we should be able to get the information.
Marion, could you just note in those discussions, and this idea is kind of coming from Sean's earlier question about, the changes over time, the complaints. We got to be sure that we're also tracking 311. I know it's difficult. You talked about the last meeting, because we could be misleading ourselves if one day Nicole says, hey, good news, the complaint volume, direct and indirect, to us at AYCDC is going down, but behind our back, what if 301 calls are going way up and we're not aware of that? So we would be sort of misled.
One of the requests,
how to capture it and compare it, right?
One of the requests with the city when we meet with them about the app is, can we push to them and can they push to us? And that's something they were trying to figure out. Can they take their complaints and push them to us?
Right.
And if they can,
I have a bad feeling it's just going to take a lot of work and manual labor, because the way they get the data is not specific to the Atlantic, to our service area, if you will. If they're doing by zip codes or community boards. So you'd have to, because you could get community board 9 or 8 or 6 or something, and then you'd have to sort through them all and say, well, which ones are related to Atlantic Yards? This thing has nothing to do with Atlantic Yards.
well, that's what we're trying to figure out. Is it coded by word, Atlantic Yards, Pacific Park? It's going to be difficult working with, we'll have a meeting, we're trying to figure it out.
Right. As much as you could get them to help you sort that out at the agency level, because 301 goes to all those different agencies, the better.
And residents are also very good about forwarding those things to me. So if they go to a Y Watch, that forwards to me automatically. And sometimes residents will give me the number and say, I called 311, and then you can always go in the system and follow it, and you can look at. So there are more manual ways, but the app will definitely help.
There will probably always be some manual just to identify the complaints that are legitimate to the project. Very good. Other questions for Nicole? Jamie, you have any more?
Okay,
go ahead.
You want to go, Linda?
We'll give Jamie a break.
I had a question about the MPT plan for B3. It shows fencing that comes right up to the corner on both 6th Avenue and Dean Street.
Is that going to be your next presentation?
That's going to be in the Green Line.
Linda, we have a formal presentation on that for you. I'm glad you asked.
Good.
Talk about a segue. Anything else, Linda, from you?
I have some general questions, but they might be
related to the
appropriate
events.
for later.
Okay, great. And if not, we'll pick them up at the end.
The presentation by Forest City will be the MPT for 1129 and for B3.
Okay.
Back to Jamie.
Yeah, just one more sort of question again about the starting June or January 2015 with the complaint log, quality of life issues. I've heard from many community members. There was even a letter that was distributed to the board, which some of us received, I guess, talking about the institutional knowledge that exists within the community of very common and reoccurring quality of life concerns. Will those be considered in the formation of this app? I think it's really important. Any of us who have, and do we have those? And
so, at the last meeting, it's kind of hard to see everybody. Thank you, Nicole. At the last meeting, we talked about when we speak of the log, it was Nicole's log when she started it. It became her personal notes, a way of tracking. Prior to that, there were a number of my former colleagues, and they kept their personal notes, but no one kept it as a log. And so some of this exists, some of it doesn't. There is institutional knowledge within the community, very little within the agency because there's been turnover. But this is Nicole's log that's been kept. That's why it's hard. Right, and it's hard for us really to go back and try to incorporate it. But to your point, when we meet with the community, I think that's the perfect segue for them to include the historical context so we can figure out how to best address some of the concerns that are ongoing, that will continue to be ongoing because of its construction. And then some of the things that have been resolved that may be diminished in number from the past to current. So no, yes is the answer to your question.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I definitely think for the app to be very robust, it would have to take into account some of the historical concerns that have come up.
Yeah, I think for full disclosure, we did speak to Jamie briefly, and she will be helping and providing her input. And other directors are welcome to, like I said, speak with Toby and make time so we can get your input as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Nicole? Nicole, there was a helpful, I just want to note for everybody, because I hope people had a chance to see it. I think you sent out, sorry I'm fumbling for it, a very helpful and detailed summary of, this is the Atlantic Yards Pacific Park Brooklyn construction update for the weeks of May 11th, May 18th. Was this part of the, I still call it the quality of life, forgive me. Was it part of that meeting?
No, that goes out bi-weekly.
Okay.
So it goes out bi-weekly. It's an update that's done about all new and continuing activity
Great.
that's happening.
So all the directors, everybody got this, right? Good.
Yes, and I'll continue to send it to the directors.
Oh, so Toby, this is your work.
Well, no, it's not my work, but I'll make
I
sure
send it to Toby.
And then I make sure to send it out to the directors once it's sent.
Because for me, it was new information. It was very helpful and it was
Yeah.
easy to read and well
I'll
compiled.
continue to send it out to you.
Thanks,
regularly.
Toby.
But it goes out every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I get it.
And then it gets posted on the website, or so the public
Yes.
can see it? Great, great.
And the public receives it. It also goes to all of our email list.
Very good. Well then, thank you, Nicole.
Good job.
Marion, what's next?
Mr. Filler.
Okay.
Hello, Sam.
Good afternoon. Obviously, our last dialogue was very apropos to this discussion about the app. I would characterize this more as a software solution, and I'll go into why it's not just an app, but something a little bit more comprehensive. So we've heard at the last AYCDC board meeting, we've heard at quality of life meetings from residents that it's very confusing as to what number or email they should exactly call or contact to get a quality of life issue resolved or documented, or a construction environmental impact that is occurring to their appropriate party. Generally, they've been going to Nicole, but there's also the Barclays Arena has their own liaison with Terrence. Roberta is the Forest City liaison, and then we also have the city. And so there's all these different portals that people can contact to register complaints or issues. And so obviously there's a need to have one phone number, one email address that these can all be filtered into, and then they're then triaged to the appropriate party that should be able to resolve them. The other thing, which a lot of you have discussed and it came up at the last meeting, is a need to quantify the performance or the ability to close these complaints or to rectify them and have that documented in an appropriate way. And then the third thing that I would say is kind of important is to, and maybe this gets to what Jamie's talking about with the historical precedents of past quality of life issues, is where are really the hot spots or persistent issues that we keep seeing happening over and over. So whatever app or software solution we come up with should be able to add this sophistication to what we're seeking to do. And so we plan to issue an RFP. Nothing has been drafted yet, nothing's posted, because we want to go through a process where we engage this board and get your thoughts and feedback on how an app or a software could appropriately work. We want to engage the community, and that's why we're going to have a meeting on May 27th at 5:30 at 55 Hanson. And if there's a need to do more meetings to discuss it, we definitely want to do that, because we want to have a solution that is widely adopted and used by the community, by our partners on this project. So we don't have this incomplete data set that from this point forward there's a very clear place where quality of life and construction impacts are being documented, and we have a record of how they're resolved, and we can then also do our metrics and do our other interesting things that can paint the picture for us. So we're like, hey, here's a persistent issue that we really need to address. So in terms of timeline, we're looking to develop this RFP over the next month and a half, 2 months, with the goal of selecting a contractor sometime at the end of the summer, and then to have a launch in the fall, hopefully right before winter comes. With the launch of this app or software solution, we definitely want to have a training for the board, and we're going to have a training for the community so everyone understands how to use it and how it can be an effective tool to document quality of life construction impacts. Internally, we've brainstormed about 6 goals of what we'd like this app to do. Again, going back to this one email, one phone number type of concept. We want to reduce the number of emails and phone numbers needed to report quality of life issues. So this app and the software will be that, digital ombudsman for the project. 2, we want to have this metric system. So, right now Nicole's documenting everything in Microsoft Excel, which is a wonderful product and has a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, there was sarcasm.
But
it, I think, when it comes to like, what you brought up, what's the difference between referral and closed? The more you kind of put into Microsoft Excel, the more clunky it gets. So what we really need is what's known in the IT world as CRM, a customer relations management system, which has it's much more dynamic, so it can incorporate tagging. We can have a lot of different ways to categorize the issues that come in. And the thing that we'd like to do, which some of these products out there can do, is actually assign it to a specific person when they come in, and that person is responsible for resolving it, and we can track it, and we can see, like, hey, Johnny, it's been 15 days, you haven't gotten that pothole fixed, or Robin, you didn't, reach out and send that email regarding the truck that was idling for too long. So, that I think will allow us to be even more responsive and more on top of, getting these issues closed. The third, which is most important, I think, is having that public input into documenting these issues, the real-time documentation of impacts as they're occurring. So we'd want, the app side of this, or the smartphone side of it, is to allow the community to be able to take photographs, video, and that would then get posted to what I've seen with some of these solutions is there's a website, and everybody can see, like, hey, Kenneth was out there and he saw a pothole on Pacific, and also Gib was out there and saw a pothole on Pacific. So 3 people in the same day documented the same thing. And we're able to see that. We can assign that to DOT to resolve, and we can send out a message, and everybody in the community says, hey, ESD and DOT are acknowledging that this problem exists, we're working on it, and then as soon as it's resolved, we can send out a message that says, thank you everybody, pothole has been filled. And so part of, I think, would be really great about this photo and video aspect of it is that there would be a geotag. And so that adds a element where we can have a map and we can say, like, again, I guess not to beat the pothole issue to death, but, on Pacific Street.
It is New York.
Every month, we're having 10 pothole issues here, and it takes 30 days for them to be filled. Can we improve that, because it really, sucks to drive down the road. So, just, yes. So again, just having another data point where we can give you a lot more robust information about, what the world of construction and quality of life impacts are. Another goal that we'd like to do, and maybe the app does this, is, people that subscribe to the app and the software in the public will then be able to receive the 2-week look ahead, any construction alerts, depending on how we're able to partner with the Barclays Arena, Barclays Arena can say, hey, avoid, Dean Street between 6 and Flatbush because it's blocked up by school buses, or it's blocked up by tour buses, whatever. And so people can, in real time get that information. I guess if Terrence doesn't want to promise that, but just as an example. And then I think the last thing, again, getting to your point about 311, is we want a software solution that has the flexibility to port with existing systems. So there's vendors out there that have design tools that have worked with 311. We want to be able to have the city, the arena, for city, all be able to participate at some level in this app, whether they're formally part of it or they have their own kind of their own third-party solutions that fit into that, that's something we'd like to do. And I know Atlantic Yards Watch has been an ongoing existing community solution, and Wayne approached me after the quality of life meeting if we'd be willing to port with that too. I mean, it's a clean slate in terms of like how we approach this app. We really want it to be the most effective tool possible, and everyone sees it as something that's useful and really, adds this level of transparency that we need to understand what are those persistent quality of life issues.
Great. Thanks, Sam. That's a helpful presentation. Questions for Sam on this? Bertha? Yes.
How much is this going to cost? Who's paying for it?
Thank you for the practical question.
We do not know the cost. We assume the cost based on the products that are out there, anywhere from eight up.
8 what?
$8,000 up. Thank you.
Way up, man.
$8. We're looking at somewhere between 8. We've seen products that go about 8 to 12,000 and about 20,000. So we haven't done a procurement, but based on the products that are out there, and then you're looking at, in some cases, annual maintenance fees. But we've not done a procurement. You're looking at...
And Marion, where's the money come from?
The money will come from either the budget that we have established here as AYCDC, and that will either come from proceeds that we have as part of our cost agreement, or it will come out of ESD.
But there's a funding source. Either way, there's a funding.
Or it will come out of ESD.
Right. That's important.
Okay. First of all, I'm old. I scratch in the dirt with a stick. So don't let this fool you. I'm just faking it.
I understand.
But what I hear that there's this world of technology out there, and there's these like really scary things called apps. And you get them on your phone and you tap that app and then everything happens. To develop the programming and the software and this, that, and the other, I have never heard of anything that's only going to cost $20,000. Seriously?
Yeah.
So there's a range of companies out there that specialize.
That already do this?
So it's basically, I don't know what you call it, a white box, or they have something, they have a standard thing that's already set up, and they can easily customize that to the needs of this community and this project site.
Marion, someone gave me an example yesterday, which might be helpful.
So there's a company
called... let's do this.
Yeah.
So let me try to answer
that's
that.
Right.
From a procurement standpoint, So from a procurement standpoint, what we have done is we have researched about 6 different companies and determined that may be our universe. There are about 20 to 30 companies that do this. And as Sam said, it's like a black box. They customize it. So the price range will vary. The 6 that we believe are the most who will probably respond to our RFP, they're much more advanced, and they've worked with the city of Connecticut,
New Haven,
Detroit,
Staten Island,
and with R311. So these are companies that already exist, have done work. I'm not going to say good reputations, I can't speak to them, but that's about where we are. So we have done quite a bit of research. From a procurement standpoint, there's not much we can do until we put an RFP together, listen to everyone. So the dollar figure is about the right range.
Okay. And we will be able to have some influence on what goes into that RFP, because I'm concerned, I'm obsessed with MWBEs, and especially MWBEs in the tech field, which we all know.
But we welcome the director's input in the crafting of the RFP, and really the scope of work for the RFP is what it would be.
Well, there's any procurement that comes from ESD will have a 30% MWB.
Right, that's right.
Hey, I run another grant program, and they're really small grants, and they still require it, and grant participants do it.
I know all about that.
But this is the city, this is the state, not the city.
Right.
The state has done better.
The state is all about it.
It's never perfect. It's never. But
Can I address what you said about fooling us with this?
Yeah.
So I think any solution also is going to have a web component. So from your work computer, you can just go on and see, hey, these are the recent things that have been logged on, and you can interface that way too if you need to. And there will still always be a phone number.
Good, yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right. You got to have all the options.
Where you actually, because
right.
there's old people like me.
That's
right. Yeah. Like you can't use all those things better than me.
I do.
Let's.
I'm like Sean.
I'm sorry, but just a point of order for Jim. We've got to go around and do the directors first, and then we'll have a chance for everybody else. So I think Liz was next. Mary.
Okay.
I was just going to add that the state has increased its procurement target from 25 to 30%, which is the highest in the country. And our governor is very serious about that. So,
but in tech, it is hard. But in tech,
those of us who work for him are also very serious about it too. So, thank you for pointing that out.
Good.
So 2 questions. One, what are the plans around the community manager? Who are you going to have to manage that? Because once you put this stuff out, it's going to drive a lot of traffic if it's advertised properly. And the worst thing that can happen is your response rate goes way down, and it creates a whole host of issues for you. So if you haven't given any thought to that, I would urge you to really give some serious thought to that aspect of it.
What do you mean the response rate?
So if complaints start to come in and you cannot adequately respond to them fast enough, because many people now know that there's a place to go, it's going to create a major problem.
Starting in the fall, your point is being considered as we look at. We have Greg, we have Nicole, and we noticed that the observation has steered more concerns or observations from our end. We're starting to figure out, and over the summer, we're going to use some college interns and going into the fall to look at our staffing needs. How do we need to make some shifts? And that's part of the whole point.
Okay.
As we're seeing an increase in things we're doing, this is going to increase that as well, and so we're looking at that already.
It's be careful what you wish for. You want input, you could get
Right.
technology can facilitate a whole lot of input.
And we're going to start with some interns just to try to figure it out, but it may lead to other needs, and we have to address
See,
it.
one thing I was going to suggest you think about, I mean, we all call 311 from time to time, but I do think there are some obstacles sometimes to the public using 311. Often they ask you to identify yourself and, all this kind of stuff. Often you have to go through a number of agencies and switchboards and operators, and people lose their patience with that. So nothing against 301, but I'm saying we don't want to duplicate those in this system. We wouldn't want to replicate those obstacles. Rather, I think we'd want to say, something as simple. And you mentioned geocoding. If Bertha had her phone and saw something and simply took a picture and emailed it to the site, it should geocode where the picture was taken, right? So she doesn't even have to say this is the corner of, Carlton, right? I mean, something as simple as emailing a picture like that, and and who cares if she sent it? No offense. I mean, it's a fact. It's a picture. It indicates a problem. In other words, just making it as easy as possible, without some of those obstacles or frustrations we have when we sometimes call 311. No offense to 311. Right? This is what the technology, and also because it's not a citywide system, it's just for this project. We should be able to do that. Other questions or comments for
I just had one more kind of question, comment. The way it's described, it's about complaints, but can you leverage this app to push out perhaps some of the more positive aspects of the project?
Well, in as much as it drives people to a website, for sure, because when there are opportunities and good things,
No, well, that's why I guess I didn't speak to it enough about the push notifications. And so we already do like a 2-week look ahead and other notices, but the ability to, people that are subscribed to the app, then we have their email addresses, they're active, and we can then be able to send them any message we need to.
A good point. Right? It's a two-way street, two-way communication.
The marketing of it, I mean, I think people have been so confused by the multiple ways in which you can do complaints. If we're just thinking about that, if you have thoughts already, or is there funding behind that? And then I think that sometimes there's like new residents coming in, and then when I sort of walk by, I'm amazed at how many people are visiting Barclays. Like they may not even live in this area, and they might have a problem and not even know what to do. And so I don't know what the answer would be, but how do you, like on the ground, have signage or something that prompts people to say, if you have a complaint, this is where it should go?
Love to work with you. We have not gotten that far. We've spent all of our energy trying to understand how to do this, what this app could be, and the procurement for this app, and the legal aspects surrounding the app. And we've not even completed the legal aspect of it, because there's some
thinking ahead.
But-
jumped ahead.
Yeah, but we would love to work with you on the marketing.
Tamara, you're at BAM, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know a little bit about
Well,
this
I mean,
kind
it's
of
sort
stuff.
of what I'm just trying to figure out if there are interesting ways in which to get that information out. And the other thing is, when we're using the app, can people then pull down data? Like, so if I sign up, if I go to the website, will I be able to look at, well, how many complaints in this type of code, this type of category? Or is that not really what it's
So I
about?
think the data aspect of it is something that we manage and we pull down and we
Mhm.
would present to
Okay.
this board and,
Okay.
make it public.
One thing I think, Marion, you touched on this, but important, we could probably talk about this all afternoon and we shouldn't, is that you're going to set up a way for directors to work with you, those that are interested, on the language of the scope of services that will become the procurement documents, right? Which is going to go out soon. So what's the best way, how do you want to offer directors that opportunity?
I think if you're interested and could tell us today, we'd take your
Or
name.
just shoot you guys an
Or
email?
but shoot us an email if you have
And should it be
interest.
Sam, you,
To Toby.
Toby? Okay, Toby, great. So just to be clear, directors who'd like to work on the creation of this RFP, really on the scope of services, and that will be the most important part of the RFP, please contact Toby. And then that could be a conference call or maybe a meeting at 6:33, whatever works for you all. But it's important for directors to have a chance to do that.
Now, there may be multiple meetings, maybe one or two of you at a time, but that's just.
And by the way, if it's, just want to send an email to Toby, but
Correct.
hey, I've been thinking about the app and here's some ideas, because you don't have time, that's fine too.
Correct.
That would be great. Now, I just want to ask if there are any other questions for Sam or Toby or Marion on this topic, because if not, I know Jim has something we'll open up for some public questions on it. We always directors first, right? Okay, so Jim, you had your hand up.
Well, the idea for the directors to be able to having input on this is key, but this is also going to be publicly accessible, even for any sort of reporting in or out. In this room, I think you've got at least 4 software developers or software background from public. So that's just something you might want to think about. I share Ms. Lewis' concerns about the cost level on this, because when you're scoping this, it isn't just a matter of customization. It's also a matter of who's doing the hosting, how long are they doing backup for you, and all those sort of things. You're going to want to have to do this and have that into your budget, along with promotional stuff, which would go in local papers and stuff, let people know that it's going on.
Right.
So it all goes together.
We should
but
budget for
the
it.
budget's a little low.
Right, I think that's helpful.
Yep.
Good. Are you going to do, what's the best way to get at Jim's point, Marion, of having community members that want to also have some input, just have helpful suggestions for this thing?
Well, next week, we're having a meeting.
At that meeting, okay.
That's the best
So-
way. And the ones who help bring this
That's the
idea
meeting,
to us.
26th?
Correct. 27th?
27th, I'm sorry.
27th at 5:30.
Okay, so Jim and everybody should know.
A number of people have already come to us. That's
Where's
how we
Gib?
got
Is
this
Gib
one.
here? Yeah, haven't we been talking, we've talked about this, this is great, okay, good.
So, yeah, Gib is the one who really helped
Good.
bring this to our.
Now, I
So-
see we're queuing up the next presentation.
Yeah, we are running short on
James'
time.
Schedule.
We're
But
short on-
Peter, excuse me, yeah.
Just as a, from my understanding, in terms of public comment, can we comment on specific points, or should I, because there's been a range of, I can save all my observations for the end.
Could you do that in the interest of time? I went to Jim because I just wanted to wrap up this particular item. Do you have something you want to say about this?
Yes.
Okay, do that and then hold the other ones, okay? Because I'm looking at Jane and I know she's got to go and we want to, yeah.
Right, I think it's, I'm actually, the Atlantic Yards Watch has been referred to, was conceived and initially instigated by the work of the District Clock Association. It started a construction log. And over the years, and I think this ties in with what I'll speak to later, over the years we ended up kind of duplicating a lot of what Nicole talked about before in terms of the construction law. And this kind of an app is very important in terms of, you still think of it as in relation to response. And I think that when there's been a lot of discussion about how to assess improvements in terms of the number of incidents that are filed, I think keeping in mind that this is a construction project that started really in 2005 for the community, and I think all of you have a letter from our block association, East Street Block Association, expressing a lot of discontent about community relations and those kinds of information problems, a lot of things over the course of that whole entire period. There's a lot of fatigue. So I don't think you can actually look at the number of incidents as the way to measure whether you've succeeded or not. And I think that it also, in terms of the app itself, in terms of the way it functions, the key thing in a lot of ways is the quality of the response and transparency in relation to it. So, I mean, just looking, and this is, again, I've done this with what Nicole did, I've done myself, and it's extremely difficult. And I just got a copy of the construction log right before the meeting. So I just looked at the first incident report, which is from Atlantic Yard in January. So as community members complained about a truck idling in a bus stop. The truck was left there in order, I guess the driver went somewhere else, and it was on Dean Street, which is not a truck route. So they idled for 10 minutes. So the incident report was closed because the truck was a boom truck, and boom trucks need to idle. So I'd have to go back and look at the details here, but just knowing, having cut through all these incident reports over the years and decided when something has been properly responded to. So you have a truck that's illegally on Dean Street, that's been abandoned in a bus stop, and which is idling. The only element of it that is responded to, and this was referred to the OEM, which is reports to Forest City, is that the truck was idling. So it doesn't address any of the other issues. And there are truck protocols, and so I think one of the kinds of things that needs to occur is that when the state provides a response, and again, this is not a criticism of Nicole because I know how difficult this is, but is to put up a response, and sometimes it's going to be very difficult, so you have to leave it up. You can't close it and make it disappear. You need the community's opportunity to post perhaps a comment on how it's closed. Like I wouldn't have, and we dealt with the whole issue of closing incident reports on Atlantic Yards Watch, and it's very complicated. It very rarely happens because you, as a community member, you have to actually have your own argument for why it should close. If you're administrating something like this. So as an oversight agency, you have to rationalize how you're closing something. If there's a reference to it going to a city agency, you're going to have to track that all the way through. And then somehow that information is going to have to get posted. The community is going to have a chance to observe it. And then the way this functions, this Atlantic Yards Watch function, is it's the transparency creates a response. So in other words, you leave the report up, closed or not closed, so that you can actually keep the data and archive it over time. So this is all part of a longer conversation.
No, but that's helpful. That's helpful.
I got a quick.
Okay, quick, Wayne, and then the rest of it, we'll save the rest for after the next presentation.
What I want to add to that is that that's all well and fine, but my problem is that as a proficient hoster on Atlantic Yards Watch, you can go there and do dust, and you can see for years we've had a dust problem. You can see for years we've had idling problems. My point is that you can say we closed it, we chased them away, but it's the matrix of you gather all that data today. Why can't somebody do something about it today? You could go to Atlantic Yards Watch and get 1,000 complaints and parse them down to see what the biggest problems are. That's what I care about, because complaining every day doesn't help. If the matrix says that the top problem is idling trucks is 1,000 of those complaints, why can't that be addressed? So an app is going to be good, but just gathering complaints isn't going to do any good if you don't say how many do we got and how do you solve that problem.
Great, that's a great point. And I think to Sam's point, the back end of the app is the CRM system, which actually lets you pull reports and do this. Peter, can it wait?
I'll be super quick. Just in terms of the separate issue of combining the construction incident report app with whether it's positive elements of the project or not. I just personally think it's a complication because people are going to an app for a particular reason. And I think when you combine, you run into issues, and and this is again with the arena, for example, we're often offered tickets, not very often actually, but the block association may be given excess tickets and that kind of thing. I think those kind of combinations can get problematic quickly, and I think that it's much better and more efficient for the state to have us, not to have that complication of associating, describing the project or implementing parts of the project that are unrelated to the notion of making a better neighborhood, which is, I think we all talk about, cranky neighbors, but really what we're talking about is something that's a great place that people want to be in, whether they're visitors or the residents. That's how it all boils down to. So that's how you create it with a little, separation of goals there.
Okay, thank you. Great. Jane needs a little introduction, and that will save time.
So I just want to apologize to everyone. Hi, directors. It's nice to be here. I usually do not have anything scheduled behind meetings like this because I know that they have to allow flexibility, but today I have to leave at 5, although I'll leave at 5:15, but I'm going to have to run in my new sandals and I'm going to get blisters. So it's really hard to see this, and the problem with this thingy is that it actually has a green light, so it doesn't really show up things. So I want to give you a quick update on the project. Marion, is that what you want?
Yes.
Where'd Marion go?
Yes.
Okay.
Right here.
So, quick project. Okay. So what's under construction? B2, I'm sorry, I am going to use the Bs. There are addresses. There's B14, and there's B11, there's the yard, and there's the green roof. What is going to begin construction soon is B3 in June. It's an all-affordable building with about 300 units in it. We're required to break ground in June and have financing and put down a completion guarantee. So right now, just recently, the green roof big crane that was on that site was disassembled. And the site has been transferred over to Tishman and from Hunt. Hunt was the construction manager, or is for the green roof, and Tishman is for B3. So that has happened, and so now Tishman has permits for the site. There's some activity going on behind that fence, and I'm going to present the B3 MPT after this. What else do I want to tell you? I want to tell you that B12 we are working on, and we hope that it will break ground in the fall of this year. Okay, so B12, and then in the summer of next year, around this time, like a year from now, the B13 would be breaking ground. So all of these buildings on Block 1129, which is one of the things that informs the MPT plan and why it was developed the way it is we are going to have 4 buildings under construction at once, along with the yard. So, and then there's the West Portal MPT, which everybody knows has been very chaotic because they're building an area under the street to connect the tunnel, and they have to close portions and then open portions. And so what we are trying to coordinate and we believe is going to happen is this is going to settle down, and it's going to go to push back on both sides of 6th Avenue and Atlantic so that there'll be two-way traffic on 6th Avenue by the time the B3 MPT goes in place, which is in June. So all of that is happening now. And I know you've seen the Flatbush Avenue crane, which has gone in for a month, so to speak. And that has work on the roof, so hopefully that's going to be very short-lived. And in the next 2-week look ahead, we're actually putting in stuff that says we might be able to disassemble the crane earlier than expected. But, we don't want to be held to things and then find out that we're wrong. But that's the goal, is to free up Flatbush Avenue immediately. So if anybody's going around and doing, site walks with DOT and looking at traffic patterns, you should not do that until the Flatbush Avenue crane is gone, because you will not be looking at what is actually happening. And that crane is disruptive because it takes Flatbush Avenue and makes it 2 lanes. And it's just, so that's my advice to anybody doing this. So any questions about the project update? Okay, so MPT, thank you. So first of all, I just want to explain that MPTs are a city requirement, and they have to be reviewed and approved by DOT. The permits
Sorry.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify? I have no idea what an MPT is.
Oh, so I was gonna
Okay.
say that. I'm so sorry. Maintenance and protection of traffic.
Okay.
I'm sure nobody thought in their lives they would have to learn what that is. They're the plans that are put in place, which are temporary street and sidewalk closures and other adjustments to traffic to allow construction to happen. So DOT has an office called the Office of Construction Management. I think it's OCMC. They citywide look at all construction plans, and construction developers and construction managers are required to file life safety plans, other kinds of technical plans that show what they need to do in order to build the building, and DOT reviews them to make sure that traffic can move and that things are safe. So MPT plans are not a creature of Atlantic Yards or Pacific Park, Brooklyn, but they are required for every construction activity across the city. And DOT is the one that issues the permits. For us, however, we have other requirements because we're an ESD project. So we have a document called the Memorandum of Environmental Commitments, and it has identified mitigation. And one of the construction mitigation that was being spoken about earlier, one of the mitigation methods is a requirement for 16-foot fence adjacent to sensitive areas. So a sensitive area is the area that were analyzed, the areas that were identified as potential for significant adverse impacts as a result of construction, but particularly in this case noise. That is where a 16-foot fence requirement comes from, and I think you heard a bit about that earlier. So what happens with 16-foot fences? It's hard to see this, I know, but you guys are going to get this and you can post it or whatever. This is a detail of a 16-foot fence. When typical construction fences are 8 feet, they're a 2-foot barrier and a 6-foot fence, and it's a 1/2 inch of plywood. For this project, we are required to have 3/4 inch plywood, okay, thick, heavy, and 16 feet. So that's a sail. It becomes a sail, and it needs a structure at its base. And the base of this was developed by a structural engineer and a civil engineer in Stantec, and it is 2 barriers plus a 16-foot fence plus something that is holding it back. This whole area, that's 6 feet at grade, is not what's required by a typical fence. What's required by a typical fence is 2 feet at grade. Plus, 2 feet at grade, those fences can be moved. They can breathe. They can go in and out. 16-foot fences cannot be moved because they can only be demolished because they have this structural zone. They're actual structures in and of themselves. So, can you go next? Yep. So this is actually the footings. The 16-foot fence that is erected around Block 1129 did not use the drawing that I originally showed you. They actually designed it differently, but it's still a 16-foot constructional zone. It can't be occupied or used by anything. People can't walk through it. You can't put equipment there. It's gone. From the point of helping construction, it is a great mitigation thing, but it is gone from that area at grade. Is not usable by the construction. So, so that's just some facts about 16-foot fences. So now I wanted to walk through MPT.
Can I just ask one question?
Mm-hmm.
So the section you showed a 6-foot wide base that was designed and could support the 16-foot fence. And this photograph shows, in addition to the 6-foot wide base, additional concrete.
This is within the 6-foot wide base. It's just a different structural design.
Okay.
What they did, instead of having 2 barriers, they have one barrier.
Okay.
Behind, that's the white that the fence is sitting on, and then they have it tied back to footings that are above grade footings.
And how wide is this?
It's 6
still
feet.
6
The
feet.
structure is the same. It's the
Okay.
design that's different.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to show you something in real life as opposed to just a Stantec drawing. So.
But normally it'd be 2 parallel tracks of Jersey barriers. Normally.
Normally, it's an 8-foot fence with one jersey
Well,
barrier.
right, but it's,
If it's done with jersey barriers, there would have to be 2. It takes up the same area. Right. So for Block 1129, this is kind of a historic overview. We looked at 1129. It's unique because it's looking at the construction of 4 buildings. It's not looking at the construction of 1 building, because we're breaking ground on the others. So it didn't seem logical or sensible to look at individual buildings when we know that we're going to be breaking ground and there's got to be coordination with all of these individual construction projects plus the yard. It just didn't make sense to develop an MPT that just looked at that, especially when we were breaking ground. This is not 6 months, but it's going to be in the fall very soon. So this is December of 2014, and this was the original sort of start plan for B14, which we were required to break ground on in December, and we look at these things in excavation and foundation phase because that's a certain type of activity with certain types of equipment that go on behind the fence. So concrete trucks, concrete pouring station, trucks that are excavating and leaving the site, and you're building sort of the bathtub or the cellar of the building so that you're getting ready for superstructure. So what this shows is an excavation phase for building 11 and an excavation phase for building 14. And it shows on parcel 12 and parcel 13 the places where these construction managers are able to put their shanty towns, store equipment. Now, because there are 3 projects that are being constructed here, the Silico Tully, which is the construction manager for the yard, is also using part of Pacific Street. Traditionally, we've been using the real estate on Block 1129 to minimize impacts on the community. Because and the bed of Pacific Street, in fact, we're required to use the bed of Pacific Street as staging area. So the concrete trucks, the dump trucks, all of those trucks, we try to get, off the street as soon as possible. And that's what this MPT plan allows us to do, because in fact, I was out there today, this is entirely occupied by Basilico Tully and Plaza's Shantytown, or whatever you call it. But, and then this is a turnaround area for vehicles and trucks, which is really important because there's not a lot of room in Pacific Street because Basilico Tully has an offset from the retaining wall of the yard, which goes down 40 feet. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and using this real estate behind the fence, which is the important thing after all. All MPTs, you want stuff behind the fence if you can, but on our documents, we're required to have it all behind the fence. So that's in our memorandum of environmental commitments. So if you go next, so this is the superstructure phase. So this is like right now. So in June, there's going to be, the crawler crane is going to come to the B11 site. That crawler crane requires 38 feet to the face of the fence. So let's see, it's 34 feet to the 6-foot barrier, and then 38 feet to the face of the fence. So what you have is a minimum dimension on these sides that pushes this fence out to the base of the fence, and then you have 6 feet of structure. So it's very consuming in terms of real estate, and that's why it has the impact it has on Dean and on Carlton. And believe me, nobody wants a 16-foot fence, but it's also performing a function that ESD, in its environmental review, made findings based on certain mitigations being in place where practicable and feasible. And when we studied this block with DOT and ESD and professional construction people and engineers, it was basically fundamentally in the end deemed by the agencies of jurisdiction that 16-foot fences were practicable and feasible. And that is why we have them there. Now, the reason we have them all over, again, is because we didn't want to implement NPT plans in phases that didn't make sense for the community. So you don't want to have, we looked at having an 8-foot fence here, but then you have this weird traffic configuration that goes in and out, which is confusing, and also this sidewalk was closed anyway. There was no crosswalk, so you're not getting parking spaces back. It's unsafe for people to go in that area or think they can go in that area. It sends a kind of crazy system, signal, and then we're gonna be in 6 months putting up a 16-foot fence anyway, which by the way blocks the street when you're constructing it. Sorry, go on.
Was there any consideration given to using that space? How wide could that space have been?
How wide? What?
Like, was there any consideration given to having that space be like a lay-by where some parking could have been restored?
Well, DOT decides what's in the street and it doesn't fit. So they prioritize what it is, so they want to make sure the traffic is getting through. They prescribed for Dean Street an 18-foot lane. So it's a shared bike lane and vehicle lane, and it was Joe Noto at the time at DOT in December. And the reason for that is because he did want to allow somebody to pull over and get past. And on Carlton, it's an 11-foot lane. So Carlton's more restrictive, but in his mind, Carlton didn't have as much traffic as Dean did. And so, anyway, in any case, so that's where these cranes are taking up a lot of real estate and they can't be moved. So there are other cranes that are helping, but they're on wheels, so they can move around, so they don't drive the outside dimension of an MPT plan to allow them to build the building. We looked at putting the cranes over here, over there. You can't build them from the other side, the back of the building. You can't build them from a hole. They have to be on the street. These buildings are required to have street walls. It's in the design guidelines. That's where you put your crane, is in front of the street wall to build your building. So, and we had Tishman and Plaza look at absolutely every possible alternative. And we had very hefty discussions with ESD and DOT and NYPD and the fire department about all of this stuff from August until December when it was implemented. So I just want you to know that the professionals, all of whom have incredible respect for each other, really worked hard on trying to figure out what the right plan was, and the intention was always to have the least impact on the community. That being said, everyone can understand why they don't like having these constraints. So it's a balance, and we have legal requirements, and we work with agencies. So, you know, we want all your brilliant ideas. I just need to tell you the story the way it was. So the next slide shows this going into superstructure, this coming into foundation, and we're now in site work here, and it is July of 2016. So a year from now, these buildings are almost complete, topped out, they're enclosed, and we're doing the open space and we're doing the sidewalks. And then the next plan shows where these are open. So once these are open, the 16-foot fences go away. It's not there for 4 years. But these still have 16-foot fences, and there's a 16-foot fence here and here to protect these now new receptors, sensitive receptors. So that is, in a nutshell, the philosophy behind what happened and the practical nature of some of the decisions that were made and what happened with Block 1125. So I don't know whether I've forgotten things. Do you want to ask questions about that now? Because I do want to get to B3 when...
Well, let's pause and give you a chance to have a gulp of water and catch your breath, Jane. Thank you. Questions for Jane on what she's presented so far?
I have a question. I'm not sure if this is the right time for it or if it will be a future presentation, but does this plan show where the future vehicular entrances will be to each building site?
No, it doesn't. We didn't need that kind of detail on an MPT plan, but there's going to be a curb cut here on B12, and there's a curb cut here on B14, and the parking garage below grade is being built in phases and is going to connect among all the buildings. Parking garage is actually going to be under these 3 buildings.
Will the parking
it will be
garage...
860 spaces total when it's done.
Will that be for residents only?
It's for, technically in the plan, it says it's an accessory, these are accessory to the project, but they're going to operate like public. They're going to be open to the community. Anybody can park there. It's not going to be restricted parking. It's going to act like it's public parking. But people will have the ability to lease a space if they want to, especially the residents in these buildings.
Good, thanks, Linda. Other questions for Jane, just in terms of what she's presented so far? If not, you see how thorough your presentation is?
So next.
Great.
So Flatbush Avenue, Green Roof
You know what? Sorry, Jane. Okay, it's about 10 of.
Okay.
How much more do you have?
I have B3. I just want to spend 2 seconds on Flatbush.
Can we let Jane finish and then let's maximize her time, and so she's here to. Good, great, thanks everybody.
Flatbush Avenue crane for the roof, which has just been installed, and I'm sure that nobody's happy about that either. But the good thing about this is it's going to be gone within a month, so people shouldn't panic about it. But if there are concerns about and comments, and ways, if there needs to be additional signage, a lot of times NPTs can be amended after they go in place. And in the case of the West Portal, it was. They redid a new crosswalk. They added signage. We did some more operational things. So if people have comments, again, they should call the CLO or they should call Peter, whoever they want. So that's the Flatbush Avenue crane. Next. So B3, which is 38 6th Avenue. Okay, we looked at, we're proposing 8-foot fences here. And by the way, any waivers from the requirements of the MEC have to be reviewed and approved by, or accepted by ESD. So we don't do things until they've been analyzed the way ESD wants them looked at. So the reason that we looked at 16-foot fences, and there are 2 stories, so let's start with 6th Avenue. 6th Avenue is a very important north-south corridor that connects Flatbush and Atlantic. And we all know from our experience with the West Portal MPT that we don't want it to be one-way northbound or one-way southbound. That just screws everything up. So when this goes in place, it will be 2 lanes going both directions. But this will locate the face of the fence out into the curbside lane, because these are the Con Ed vaults, and we have to build the Con Ed vaults from the street and other utilities too, but this is the big megilla, and that drives where this fence location needs to be for excavation and foundation. For superstructure, it needs to be there as well, because there's the concrete pouring station, and there's also the crane that are located on 6th Avenue. So one of the reasons why we couldn't have a 16-foot fence here is because we don't have a place. First of all, there's no pedestrian. We're closing the pedestrian route here and having people cross over, but we're leaving a 5-foot pedestrian path here. We have no room for either a pedestrian path or a 6-foot structure zone here. It would make Pacific Street 22 feet wide, which was not acceptable to DOT. But what happens when it's 22 feet wide is the trucks that are coming from wherever they're coming from, including Barclays Center, they are supposed to be turning north. And they can't see the traffic coming southbound, and the southbound traffic can't see them making this turn. So we would have had to move this stop bar back to about here, which is not an optimal condition. Mid-block stop bars are no-nos in DOT land. Plus, it was dangerous for pedestrians because they don't know, where to cross. Why is the traffic stopping there? It's hard to determine what is going on. So DOT found that to be an unacceptable and unsafe condition. So by locating the fence here, we have solved that problem. And on the Dean Street frontage, initially for excavation and foundation, the fence is going to be located on the sidewalk. It's going to be located on the sidewalk. with a 5-foot pedestrian path protected, because DOT requires 5-foot pedestrian paths protected on Dean Street in front of the arena because it's a place of public assembly. So you can't have a 16-foot fence and have a 5-foot pedestrian path because it affects Dean Street too much. But the other reason why we can't do it for excavation and foundation is the MPT plans for these buildings have to be coordinated. So B2 has an MPT plan that's already approved. B2 is a modular building. It has wide loads that get delivered, and per the B2, the approved MPT plan, stored in Dean Street at night so that they can go into the site and be picked in the morning. And one of the places that they store mod is right here. So until January of 2016 or thereabouts, when we will have stacked all the mods on B2, this needs to be reserved for that. They're sharing this area of Dean Street, basically. So that's for excavation and foundation. Then if we go to the next one, which is the last one, the 6th Avenue stays the same, but what happens with the Dean Street is it bumps out now because there is the hoist and the loading area, and they need the area for those to do the superstructure. And the crane is here, and the concrete is here. We looked for other places. ESD suggested looking at this, looking somewhere else where we could put the loading dock and the, delivery zone and the hoist. And they need to be together, and there was not enough real estate, and it didn't make practical sense, but it was just ultimately there was not enough dimension in the right places for them to coexist elsewhere on the site. So, but DOT required 2 11-foot lanes here, and this is the turning lane, and we did, truck turning radii studies to make sure that trucks can make that turn and not have the conflict with the southbound traffic.
Jane, can you just point out the sensitive receptors, the nearest ones?
Okay, so the other thing, what's different from this in Block 1129? Block 1129 is in an area where there are the most sensitive receptors, which are the residential area. This area is more mixed use, and it has a lot more traffic, but it does have sensitive receptors. There's a couple across the street, and there are some over here. So there are people that are impacted by not having a 16-foot fence. So in order to find some other acoustical mitigation, or to supply some, we are supplying a blanket that's going to, an acoustical blanket that is going to hang inside the entire fence, which will further dampen sounds from behind the fence, but it will be not be 16 feet, only be 8 feet. So I'm sorry I'm so anxious and I'm sorry.
Are you almost done?
Yeah, no, I'm done.
Okay.
Right? That's done. Right?
Could you just to orient me a little bit, where's the Dean Street entrance to the arena in the bottom there? Right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, just in terms of, right, okay. Good. Questions for Jane from directors first, please.
I have a question about, if you go back to the previous slide, there's going to be an 8-foot fence right at the corner. How will Dean Street traffic see cars coming south?
So one of the
on 6th
comments,
Avenue?
which we also had at Vanderbilt and Dean,
Yeah.
from the fire department, and we actually did this also when we built the arena because we had the fence in the same location, is that these need to be transparent so that they can see through. That does not solve the turning problem for a 16-foot fence. Even putting windows doesn't solve it because you can't see way back here. But with an 8-foot fence, if we make these things transparent, then people can see, and pedestrians too can tell sort of without even walking around the corner what's going on.
Good, thank you. Other questions for Jane? Well, very, very thorough, obviously. Let's go around the room. Peter. I'm sorry, and would you remind me who you are?
I'm Mona from Dean Street, and
Good.
I just wanted to invite everybody to my house tonight at midnight because I wanted you to experience what it's like to have overnight construction going on across the street from your home. It's unbearable to the people on Dean Street, especially the people facing Pacific. And I just wanted to go on record and request that nobody ever in Albany or Buffalo or here in the city approve overnight construction again, because again, it's really, really unbearable for the community and it's not fair. So I just wanted to say that. I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
go home now and get some sleep, so anybody that wants to come over at midnight.
All right, thanks. Wayne?
Not to state the obvious, but the 78th precinct, since I'm the 78th precinct council president, we're going to lose about 30 to 54 spaces of police parking, and we are working on that, but that is going to be a problem. They can't put cop cars because of the damage. People come after them. They've got to be somewhere where they're in the camera range, blah, 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 and that has still not been resolved. And we have those cars, they park on both sides of that, and that's now going to be gone because of this MTP. And now everybody, the residents are worried that now the police are going to take their parking again, and we'll lose even more parking. So.
What was that number, sorry?
Well, there's between 34 and 54 spaces, there's cars that have been parked. And so they've already taken over 100 and something spaces away with all this MTP. And so now, this is the police, and so they take priority, so they're going to do what? What's the solution? Now, again, the 78, Barclays, everybody's working on it, but it's something it's gonna happen soon, and it has to have a resolution. There are solutions, it's just the will to make the solutions happen.
Okay. Thanks, Wayne. I wasn't aware of that. Peter?
So actually, my questions are for June, so
Yeah.
I'll be really quick. There's a couple of things here that I think about. I wanted to thank you for covering those things, and I just wanted to kind of take a step back. Although I'm talking about the 16-foot fence, and I'm talking about the mitigations on, the MPT on Dean and 6th. What I'm really talking about is noise attenuation, community engagement, and and in the way how things can improve moving forward. So just as an example, I want to talk about the 16-foot fence. So the plan started in August, I think Jane said.
Well, we always have to figure out a proposal and start to understand the parameters of a situation, because we don't make it up.
Right. So
it's all professionally prepared, and then we have to give give something to the professionals and the agencies of jurisdiction for them to review it.
Right. So, I mean, we had roughly about a week's notice for the little bit more for the fence that was approved, and it wasn't put in place with any kind of engagement with the businesses that are across the street on Dean Street. Jane, I don't know, you have to run? So,
I think she's running.
We will follow up with Jane.
But Peter, no, you continue with us.
Keep on going then.
So all your comments will be.
Thank Jane, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
So we can.
Peter, why don't you finish and let us, so we know what you're talking about.
So the fence was brought to the community after approval. The fence was implemented in a way in which, at least to our mind, the proper notice wasn't given, and I think DOT who would be the ones who would fine on this basis, weren't able to verify from Forest City's own contractors and Greenland's own contractors that the proper notice was given. So a whole host of residents were given parking tickets when the fence was put in place. This isn't something we've had a chance to discuss at any of the community update meetings. So this is the first time it's actually been raised in public. It has been brought forward when it happened. The fence itself, the language in the Memory of Environmental Commitments, and I think Rachel can speak to this, the 16-foot fence requirement, where practical and feasible, hasn't changed through the course of the project. And the work that took place on Block 1129 in the past included demolitions of buildings. Almost the entire block was building, some of them 6, 7 stories tall, I think. It included clearing the area and putting in the parking lot for the arena, including the excavating to put in the drainage for the arena. It it had all the same kinds of noise and vibration and everything impacts as the work that's taken place now. But we had an 8-foot fence. So the difference, I mean, in part, I guess part of this will be in the technical memo that's been posted. We'll be able to discern what the differences are here. But it seems to me that the couple differences are that the fence has been moved meaningfully further from the source of the construction noise towards the sensitive receptors, which requires the taller fence. That's different than before when the fence was closer to the construction work. The closer the fence is to the construction work, the higher the level of efficiency of the fence in terms of creating noise mitigation. It doesn't have to be as tall. The terms of the implementation as well, sorry for this, but in terms of the implementation, trees are being hit on Carlton Avenue, and there have been several more since, sorry, Nicole, we kind of, we don't score them, but I'll send you the incidents. That's because the trees are leaning into the road. It is, I think, a city's requirement that in the planning of construction, you take into account tree protection. And I don't think in this case that happened. And what we've seen is, all along the perimeter of the fence, we see tree damage because cars are pulling over and hitting the trees, or on Carlton, they're hitting the tree trucks. On Dean Street, it's because cars are pulling over. Sometimes they get pulled out of the way to make room for fire trucks that are coming through, or emergency vehicles. So the tree protection should be there. The only tree protection, there's no tree protection on Carlton Avenue. It's supposed to be tree protection within 50 feet of construction, which would seem to require that there be tree protection put in place across the street. At minimum, I don't know if it seems to be a requirement. If somebody reads it differently, at least it should be a courtesy. And in terms of Dean Street, the Vanderbilt buildings, the contractor for Vanderbilt finally, maybe last week, put in protection. The other protection that exists on Dean Street has been put in by the contractors on the other side of, on
the Dean or Carlton?
On Dean Street have been put, those barricades have been, barriers for the trees have been put in place by the contractors on the opposite side from the development, from this project. And they looked a lot of different ways. That's because the Parks Department required them to do it, not this project. This kind of ties together, though, with the issue of noise attenuation and notice to community. This is what I really wanted to talk to Jane about, is that there was a problem, in my view, with, and I think I raised this at the last meeting, with community notice about the availability of the noise mitigation. So the letter that was received by the community is received by only, to my knowledge, a small number of property owners. It was a certified letter. It was dated to the point of the groundbreaking of Carlton Avenue building, but received 2 to 3 months later. The memorandum of environmental commitments, to my understanding, requires the notice to occur before the work takes place that's going to cause the noise. And again, this goes a little bit to what I think Jamie mentioned about when she asked about notice to tenants. If we have a clear idea, the geographic area that the mitigations are available to, the community can help notify the tenants who live there that they can get air conditioners. And that should happen before the work starts. And in terms of the quality of the noise mitigation, again, in terms of the windows, you have a technical memo, take a look at, welcome the information. It would be very helpful to know what quality window is being put in place, because on the 6th Avenue, Dean Street intersection, you're going to have some rear windows exposed, and there are tenants, the property owners who have got rear windows that might want replaced now. That's the new requirement of the project. This also was a new requirement that wasn't included in the notice to the property owners before, by the way. It only referred to street-facing facade. So, I mean, this is one of my questions, actually, and this is for Rachel, is if they didn't meet the memorandum of environmental commitments in terms of the notice to the public, was there a penalty for City?
As Jaden was describing in the earlier part of the meeting, they have assembled their record keeping for what outreach they have done, who they've contacted, who are the eligible properties, which street-facing sides of the building are eligible, who's had air conditioners, who's had storm windows, who's had window replacements. We just got that information, and as I said, we will be reviewing that information with our monitor. So I can't answer for you right now how much they are in compliance, how much is not in compliance, what is catching up, what is from before, but that's an exercise that we're undertaking now.
Could I just maybe suggest two things, Rachel, Rob and Marion? So we are, I don't know if we've set a date yet, but we're going to meet in June to talk about the open space issue that I think Marion flagged. And could we, is that enough time, let's assume there's enough time, could you report back or give information to us that we could share, Rachel, to look at this question? You know, did Forest City meet all the notification requirements appropriately? Let's look at that and come back in June. Greenland, right? And also, and again, Jane's not here, not to, you know, we could get back to her and look at this question. With Peter's question behind us, looking forward and at the summer months, what are the plans to do like really assertive notification to everybody who might be eligible for an air conditioner this summer? As an example, I don't know how it works, but again, it's in the MEC, and you know, so again, if maybe in June you all could report back on what Forest City intends to do. I'm still a little vague, again, it's my own ignorance about, you know, this notification. And I think I hear in Peter's comment a suggestion that there's a lot of people who will be willing to help get the word out, but there has to be enough anticipation and advance notice so that we can all help do that, including the Main Street Block Association. So some potential agenda items for June, okay, Mary?
That's fine.
Great, Peter, thank you. Any other questions at this point from the public on Jane's report? If not, we'll let Marion wrap up. I think.
So, may I ask one question? There is one last report that's coming from Barclays related to their event protocols. It's really a matter of timing.
No, let's do it. We're here, right?
You're on, Terrence.
I have a question for Jane, which is, if the crane, maybe someone else can answer this. Peter, if I answer this.
Well, Scott's
the
here.
Atlantic Avenue. Jane says the Atlantic Avenue crane. Sorry, Flatbush Avenue crane should be done in a month.
A month.
Does that mean the green roof will be done?
The green roof won't finish. The green roof won't finish until late summer.
How do you work on it without the crane?
There's still the crane on Atlantic.
Oh, right. Of course. I've noticed that one. So the Atlantic crane, and how long does that crane stay up?
I don't have the exact date, but I'm going to read
How's it, just general, while he's setting up, and how is it, what is it you plant up there? Sedum?
Sedum, Connecticut.
How's that going?
From where?
Connecticut.
It's going very fast.
And yeah, there's a picture that was distributed, which is, and I'm going to guess, because that's a succulent, that the idea is just natural rainwater is enough to water it? And it's tough and hardy? You don't want to put a crane on and go replant it?
Grow in New York?
Yeah, I'm stunned. I'm with you on that one, Rachel.
Sedum?
No, Liz actually
Yeah,
said
Liz,
it. I've been pushing for New York business-to-business exchange for as long as I've been in government. So it is, what do you want me to do?
Wow.
Well,
The conversation for the next time.
all right. Let's wish the Sedum good
Thorn
health.
soil.
Turn it over.
Yeah, sure. Well, good afternoon. My name is Terrence Kelly. I will actually work off a few prepared notes while we go, just so for the sake of brevity. And so just to introduce myself and give an operations update. Good afternoon. I said my name is Terrence Kelly, and I'm Community Affairs Manager for Barclays Center. I work on a number of different initiatives and programs specific to quality of life as related to arena operations, event management, and overall impacts in the neighborhood. I've been asked to briefly give you an overview of arena operations and event management. So just to go through what we'll go through here, just 4 points. Introduction of the arena, arena operations and event management, stakeholder engagement, and then workforce and community development. So these are really the focuses of what I'm charged to do at the arena.
Which is why you're not at the NBA draft this evening.
June 25th.
It's actually June 25th. Right?
So
Somebody
just to show to discern between the two, arena operations are what we refer to as all back-of house tasks, jobs, and operations required to run an arena, to prepare for and set up for events. on the other side, event management refers to the event itself taking place and the planning logistics involved. The key to both these sides is communication and coordination with community and public-private stakeholders. In its 3 years since we opened in September 2012, Barclays Center has quickly become one of the most visible and successful entertainment venues in all the world. We've seen more than 4.5 million ticketed guests come here for over 500 ticketed events, ranked number 2 in the country and number 4 worldwide in number of tickets sold for arena events in regards to arena venues. We were number 1 the year before, and we're on track to stay consistently in the top tier of arena venues worldwide.
If you're Terrence, if you're number 2 now, who's number 1?
An arena not to be named.
I can guess.
Across a certain East River.
Yeah.
Told the river, Terrence.
Well, one of the key ingredients to success is the considerable number of protocols that we put in place. And we couldn't be successful without special attention to detail and focus on ensuring a smooth operation both inside and out. We're really informed by public safety and quality of life in terms of reporting, addressing, identifying, and resolving quality of life issues, and they help guide the operations of the arena. So just to move forward through here, and we can reference these as well, but just these are some bullet points about what we've done to in terms of that inform the overall arena operations. We start with transportation, number 1. $78 million new transit entrance and station upgrades, 11 subway lines and 11 trains with plus the LIR make an incredible, useful to have a transportation hub across the street. And 3 out of 4 event guests use public transit to and from. In addition to, these are just a couple of other features we have. But what we'll do is we'll move forward. Major productions, as you may know, include Video Music Awards, Super Bowl kickoffs, the draft, 2015 All-Star Weekend, which we'll review as well, our bid to host the DNC, which went away. But then upcoming now, we have 2, on the horizon, we have in the near term, WWE, which is professional wrestling, coming at the end of summer with SummerSlam, which will be a great big event. And then also next year with the NCAA tournament, men's basketball coming for the first 2 rounds. So, as mentioned, these are the arena operations and event management broken out. Protocols. So loading and delivery operations have developed protocols, and they cover large and small deliveries, including event-related loading and load-out activities. All deliveries are scheduled through the loading dock management staff. Staff's on site outside the loading dock and inside to coordinate use of the truck elevators and the loading dock below grade. Key priority is to keep Jean Street clean. I think that the loading of the vehicles, as outlined in what we use as one of our loading dock documents support that we provided to ESD several months ago, we've routinely updated as well. What we do is we're mindful to give verbal and written instruction to all of our vendors on a regular basis when they arrive at the arena. So we live and die by these rules. These are the rules. And these are the commitments that have been outlined in the MEC and in project documents that are previous to me being on the job at the arena and its opening. However, they are readily available. They should be published online. We're happy to give better information and provide as needed physical copies as needed as well. So what we do is, in addition to this, we also make our best effort for our security team outside of this on the arena block to give verbal instruction and to work with our loading dock operation to coordinate for arrivals. As all scheduling, all vendor approvals, all arrival times, inspections, loading and unloading is done beforehand. We have certain windows and a matrix that we use as as mentioned before. We have our own CRM, client relationship management tools. So what we do is we do booking deliveries on a very controlled and contained basis. It's not just it's good business for us as well, because in addition to not having blockage on Dean Street, we also believe that it's important to us to keep a well-oiled machine inside the building, and without an efficient loading dock with 2 truck elevators out on Dean Street, it just won't happen. There's no staging allowed. There's signage, visible signage on every piece of the arena block and property notifying trucks. There's code enforcement that is, as mentioned before in Nicole's report regarding vehicle summonses, being nearby the NYPD, and also having emergency service vehicles sort of sweep the area. We do work with our local code enforcement agencies to run a tight ship there as well. Late arrivals are sent away from the loading dock and are told when the determined time to return would be. We typically try to accommodate as needed, but we certainly want to make sure that everyone is provided with these protocols. In addition to this, we have event cheat sheets, which are one-pagers related to event-related production trucks that show, what we do is, we have event-related cheat sheets that show event drivers, truck drivers for show vehicles, for runner vans, what have you, clear and express truck route directions to and from our off-site parkings, which are both available here. This is just an outline very specifically. We can also, again, provide these in better detail. This is more just as a visual to lead us in the conversation. But these are the outlines we provide to every single vendor about how our loading dock operates. In addition to that Red Hook Container Terminal, we have off-site parking there. We also work with the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal to use ancillary space as needed for event production. Notably, the NBA All-Star is a good example of when you need a tremendous amount of staging to keep the vehicles off the arena block as well. We provide all of our truck drivers with express truck routes using Atlantic Avenue, and the circuit is Dean Street. When you leave Dean Street, you make the left onto 6th Avenue, back to Atlantic, down Atlantic to Columbia, down Columbia, or forgive me, I believe it is Columbia to Van Brunt, and then back into the cruise terminal. And that's the circuit, and that is it. And then when you return, it's off of Flatbush onto 5th Avenue. You make the turn onto Dean Street, and then you go into the loading dock. We believe that not only is it a commitment that we live up to and we want to adhere to, but it's also the easiest, it's the most efficient way. And at first, we ran into a bit of a struggle when it came to communicating with our new vendors and contractors when the arena opened. But we really hit a stride, and people understand it. We're not telling them something just to tell them what to do. We're telling them because it's the easiest way to do their jobs, and they appreciate that because we're quarterbacking it the entire way. We're giving them the information they need to do the best. So in addition to that, we also work with NYPD, the FDNY, so the 78th Precinct and Ladder 105 on the arena block, the Mayor's Office and all stakeholder coordinating agencies citywide and at the state level to ensure that event management is coordinated across agencies, and also that the best information is made available so that we can ultimately turn and posture and deliver this in public communications to area residents and the community at large. So,
Terrence, I'm sorry, just a quick question.
Sure.
While you're on the subject of the off-site parking. So if Rachel's favorite, let's just say Justin Bieber has a show and it's like 10 53-foot trucks that have to lay over for a couple nights, they all end up typical concentration at the cruise terminal?
That's correct. There's 6 loading docks, there's 6 bays in the loading dock below.
Right.
And what we do is we'll coordinate to have 2 or 3 at a time arrive at the arena block. So if their show is in Philadelphia,
right,
they'll go immediately to Red Hook Terminal instead of the arena block.
Right.
And then we will call them 2 by 2 or 3 by 3 as it happens.
But I guess, it's a Community Board 6 question, really, and I don't know if you can answer it, but has there been any concern by folks in Red Hook, to have all these trucks being stored down there?
Well, I mean, it's really
the traffic and so on.
Well, to be honest with you, it's really they're usually in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So they're really and what we're talking about is not lights and sound and honking and gridlock. We're talking about your average Red Hook Container Terminal does business with thousands of trucks on a regular basis.
Right.
You have Phoenix Beverages there that
has
I know,
I'm familiar
beer
with
trucks
it,
going out at all hours of the night. So it really, in the course of business, is a very sort of standard.
It's really Columbia Street's the impact if you're going to the container terminal more than Red Hook.
And and I think we're mindful of development over there as well, and with what it looks like in the landscape. But in terms of general operations, it's been very, very helpful to have this clear, direct instruction to our vendors, to our production trucks going forward. So this is what we've outlined for them. And then again, we will work with, and I think this is a great opportunity to make sure that the project documents are adhered to by updating and providing updated outreach materials to be published on the ESD website.
Thanks.
So what this does is, internally we're coordinated, externally we're coordinated with government agencies, and what it does is now we turn to how do we communicate and how do we do public outreach and effective dissemination of information. So there's several ways that we do this. Before the, I think that, really where it starts at, and I just want to, return to, is that public transit, number one, is that we don't want the additional vehicle traffic in the immediate area of Barclay Center. So, before even day one, we encouraged public transit. We retained Sam Schwartz Engineering to develop a comprehensive transportation demand management plan, which was implemented to great success. We set high benchmarks in terms of what that success really means, and we achieved them with, as mentioned, 3 out of 4 event guests using public transit to get to and from events. Some of the other things we did was, again, build a new transit entrance, renaming of the station, developed a comprehensive marketing plan to push public transportation in the mind's eye of potential guests. None would be more so than our upcoming Islanders crowds coming, and we have again done a tremendous push on the marketing arm, with our marketing arm to develop a public awareness campaign out on the island in Nassau, Suffolk, and also citywide. We've also reduced the number of parking spots specific to the arena by 50%, as outlined in the project. So that also reduced the total number of expected vehicles that would be able to be accommodated in the area as well. Establishing traffic control center, as those project documents that we just looked at, those are all run through a colleague of mine who coordinates with all transit stakeholder agencies on a regular basis, giving update times, giving advance notice so that they can staff properly, that they can get their arrival and departure times right, so that there's not overcrowding downstairs, that there's additional trains as needed when you have Billy Joel playing on New Year's, and that also it's effective in their long-term planning because they have an engaged stakeholder in the private sector that is meeting them halfway with making sure that they're not running gap trains that aren't needed, that they aren't running with, that they're running at optimized efficiency, and that's something that we also, we strive to keep our mind's eye on, is that you need good partners, but you only develop good relationship with partners when you have something to show for it. So, in addition to that, we also stage every event we pay for a detail of traffic enforcement agents from NYPD, and then also pedestrian traffic managers. They serve dual purposes. The traffic enforcement is to safely manage the flow of vehicle traffic through the grid and the system around Barclay Center, Atlantic Avenue, Flatbush Avenue. The pedestrian traffic managers do exactly as they're charged in their name. They make sure that there's safe ingress and egress of event guests and neighborhood residents on event nights as well. We also use the Red Hook Terminal and other alternate staging areas, off-site parking, which we pay for based on need and accommodation, to stage private buses, to put additional vehicle trailers, to put runner vans, as we call sprinter vans, whatever production needs, so that there's just a clear space to operate on the arena block. There's no loading, unloading, there's no production activity unless otherwise permitted. Outside on the curb cut, on the parking, on the driveway into the loading dock elevators. And so these additional resources really do help us cut down on the overall amount of volume of vehicle traffic coming and going from Barclay Center as well. So we work pretty hard to ensure that this is a smooth, a well-oiled machine. But I think it's important to also point out the rare times where there may be potentials for conflict, or that there wasn't an optimal circumstance for anyone, and we believe that public outreach, community coordination is really where the essence of where we can sort of bridge the gap between those issues and improve quality of life overall. So critical cornerstone is really the operations strategy and getting the stakeholders all on the same page so that we can produce public documents. This is from MBA All-Star 2015. Again, it's pixelated, so we can certainly share the project documents, but many of it in the room have seen these documents before because they were developed in coordination with the Mayor's Office, NYPD, and other stakeholder agencies to outline exactly what the community impacts would be on President's Day weekend, which was when NBA All-Star took place in Brooklyn. So with NBA All-Star Saturday night, there was a tremendous amount of buses that would be bringing in event guests from Midtown and Lower Manhattan. In addition, there were private vehicles, and there was a need to not create additional congestion. So plans were made by the Mayor's Office and the NYPD and communicated through us because of our relationships, and also the NYPD 78 Precinct Community Council, which has been an excellent resource for ongoing sort of feedback loop and getting right what this information should be and what it should look like, and how developed, how detailed it should be as well. So in addition to that, we've done regular meetings with block associations, tenant organizations, civic groups at large. During the VMAs, we've done outreach meetings with the Dean Street Block Association. We've done regular meetings with the Newswalk building, the Dean Street Block Association between 4th and 5th Avenues on the other side of the arena block to the west in CB6. So we really do, if we're invited to come, if we intend to be there, and we want to deliver as much information, as nuanced, as intimate as possible to the people who will be experiencing impacts, and then get better feedback on how, going forward, we can put together a sort of an informed opinion and an informed reaction when future events come, so that, again, institutional knowledge is very important, and we believe that the gathering of such through these informal meetings, but also through public communication, is very important, and will ultimately improve not just quality of life based on arena operations, but coordinate with Pacific Park, with other developments. I mean, there's so much other development in the area that we have to be mindful of, that it's all very important. It all sort of speaks to the larger coordination efforts to make sure that there's no one experiencing undue burden. So in addition to that, we wanted to just make sure that people have sort of an understanding of the baseline of not just how the arena operates, but how we conduct ourselves as interpreted through the project documents outlined, but also how we, going forward, work with stakeholders. It's really, direct dialogue is really important. I'm looking through to see, the other thing that we also do in terms of direct dialogue is I send out a monthly e-blast of the upcoming event calendar. It does, it runs through not just what the event dates, times, and expected attendance will be, which is something that a lot, arenas typically don't do, is give their expected attendances as well, which we keep updated on a regular basis. But we also offer ticket discounts, upcoming events in the community that we're sponsoring, related events, news and new and noteworthy. A good example would be what's happening on the green room. People do want to know what is happening in their community, and this is an excellent way to sort of keep a finger on the pulse so that people can respond in kind and say, thank you, Terrence, for sending this out. We're doing an event at, for instance, in Red Hook, or at John Jay High School for community fair. We're doing a job fair at John Jay High School. Can you attend? And we say yes. Or we're doing one at the Borough President's Office. Would you like to sponsor? And so those are excellent ways to maintain that direct dialogue with constituents, with stakeholders, with residents, with anyone. We want to be part of the fabric of the community. In addition to that, we also have a set weekly meeting. It's very informal, but as Wayne knows, arena leadership meets with the NYPD to sort of vet and plan accordingly. They represent, I believe, the best interest of everyone in this room as well. It gives an honest assessment of a third party in informing how we should proceed with event planning. And our weekly leadership includes our general manager who attends. Yeah, it's been very, very helpful. Another final piece of this is we have a retail working group established with the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce and the local business improvement districts to learn how we can better cross-market and use the arena as a platform for economic development in the neighborhoods surrounding Barclays Center on all fronts. So, even tonight, would be, part of the working group's, charge is to attend different special events and to coordinate. So, Again, the North Flatbush bids annual meeting is tonight. That's an excellent example of somewhere we'll be at.
So now we know where you're heading next time.
That's correct. So the
now, yeah, Wayne's going to go to that. Wayne has to go to that too.
Right.
Now, I don't know how much more you have, but we have a time constraint.
Sure. I mean,
because the Department of Labor won't let us labor much longer.
Sure. So I would finish up.
Because it'd be great. I'm sure people have questions for you, Terrence. Very helpful. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us this afternoon. Questions for Terrence? From directors first. Well, okay, if they're hearing none, I just have a quick one. The Islanders give you, what, 44 additional dates plus playoffs if they make the playoffs, which that's another story.
40 plus, yeah.
40 plus. So will that put your attendance, I'm going back to that other building across the river, why wouldn't that put your attendance, paid attendance, back into the #1 spot?
Oh, I mean, we're a smaller building, number one. We're expecting about 15,800 as our maximum capacity.
For hockey.
In addition, it doesn't add dates to an existing calendar, so it will just certainly block out spaces that may have been used for additional concerts or other events in the arena. Our attendance is
a defeatist attitude.
And we think that Islanders are a great team. They're young, they're vastly improved, and they have nothing to do but go up.
Well put. Well put. But the dates are important, and I mean I know you sort of addressed it. The logistics. Islander fans on the railroad. I assume you're doing a lot of work with the railroad to encourage them not to drive because a lot of them have cars.
Right. We've spent a considerable amount of money on our marketing efforts. If you look on the Babylon lines of the Long Island Railroad, you see train to the game for every single Islanders. So there's billboards out. Long Island Railroad president has met with our corporate leadership to make sure that the sentiment is felt that this is where we need to focus our attentions. We've been driving home the messaging with all Islanders season ticket holders that have renewed subscriptions with Barclays Center. And we believe that, in terms of regular operational, once we hit a stride, similar to Nets events, unless it's a large profile, such as having the English royalty arriving for LeBron James in December, we believe that we can hit a stride and gain a footing in terms of having a greener protocols that are stabilized, not so much just on the business side of it, but on the neighborhood impact side as well, and that it'll be great to have these nights booked with events that we sort of can see in advance what they're going to look like. They'll not say typical, but as typical as.
When you say hit your stride, and I'm sorry, I really will finish with this, but how many dates did you have in 2014? Do you know how many events you had?
We've averaged over 200 per year.
Because I was thinking it'd be like 220 to.
Right.
So does that number change with the Islanders adding 40 plus dates, or you're saying not really? I'm kind of just again anticipating the Islanders mean
the latter. So there will be we do not expect that there will be additional dates on the calendar for others.
What's optimal for the arena? What's the right number of dates?
I don't know if the right number of dates works, but since the beginning, I believe we've intended to have 200 plus, but 220 is where we. I think we set out in our minds.
That's the number I have in my head. Yeah, and I suppose that's an unfair question because it would depend on the ticket revenue as a function of ticket prices, right? Not just number of people in the room. Okay, got it. Very helpful. Other questions for Terrence? Questions from the public? Yes, ma'am. Please introduce yourself.
May Taliaferro. I live on the block Terraceville on Pacific Street between Flatbush and 4th. Pedestrian crowd control. With the Islanders coming, will there be pedestrian crowd control after the games?
As always, yes.
All right.
Like there is with the Nets, you mean?
Well, the Nets, I guess they've learned to go straight down the subway and not really be boisterous going up the Pacific Street block.
Less intoxicated?
Less intoxicated, and then they use the garden as a urinal, but that's a different story. Is there a way to prevent the crowd coming up that Pacific Street block, a residential block? I mean, they can go to that train station on Pacific and 4th going up Flatbush. They can go to that train station right there in front of the arena. Is there a crowd control to prevent them the crowds running through that block? There's not a restaurant up there on the corner either.
I'm
Yeah,
mindful of
usually
your
it's,
concern, and I know that we've been
Yeah,
through.
part of the problem is they go to PC Richard parking lot and then they hang out, smoke weed and drink and whatever there.
Well, we'll do it, but, I think that we'll observe, we'll assess conditions, and we will adjust as needed, and we will rely as usual if there are the conditions that you're experiencing that are not typical or, are not, evident to everyone on every block,
Well, I
we need to
can't
know.
wait for their app.
Oh, yeah, well, we'll hopefully we'll be in touch, and if there are things when it does start, obviously I'll be out there. If there's ways that we need to adjust our approach to the external footprint, we'll be in touch.
Yeah,
for
you
sure,
were there
right?
when the arena first opened, they put the ugly tower there, they adjusted the crowds, but we don't need anything, that way. NYPD doesn't have to make it look like a camp, but there should be some crowd control going through the residential block.
Well, yeah,
Because we're like a
for sure.
Especially when those guys lose, which they do.
Especially when they lose,
Terrence, the 7 o'clock starts or 7:30 starts, if you know? Because a hockey game is pretty religiously 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I can't tell offhand. I don't know.
Been interesting, just again, for the community to have a sense of when games are going to get out, because.
Sure. Again, it is very, very sort of scripted when it comes to hockey.
Right. 7 o'clock is 9:30. So
Right.
like you know.
It's again, it's very similar in typical
So
Nets games as well. It's very sort of 7:30 to 10 is a 2.5 hour block. Right. It's going to be that way. So again, that's what it speaks to, and we want to reinforce that. When I say hitting a stride, it's at the typical event nights. It's easier for the community to, hopefully, it's easier for us to adjust and improve on the, and make sure that we're doing things, for quality control outside, and then also that people get a sense of, consistency.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
If there's any follow-up questions, my contact information is available. But
Wayne.
Well, one thing for the argument, speaking on behalf of the 78, we've now instituted, I don't know, probably within the last couple of months, private events were always problematic because they don't put them on their calendar. Now we've instituted where the Barclays, their event management people, the 78 precinct, we all sit down, decide on what we're going to tweet, and we just say private event. It may or may not be problematic, buses, no buses, whatever all that is. And then the local residents, if they follow the 78, because they're the ones that publish it, because they're the ones that are going to know if the streets are closed.
Right.
The 78 gives out actual information, so in a day or two in advance, so when the people know that they're going to come home, they know what to expect, and it's not a surprise. So those complaints are gone down. But again, it's arguments for transparency and giving information out the best that you can do, because it does that type of stuff, helps the neighborhood.
I just have a question. Is that information the route for the staging and the terminal and the buses, as well as kind of the fixed start and finish times? Is that stuff that we have on our website? I mean, it certainly could be like a push notification, whatever they're pulling together when the app comes.
Well,
but
it's
for
a
right
good,
now,
good issue for the app.
right? Exactly.
I think we definitely could do it for the app as a push.
But is it right now on our website? Like, there's an event today. This is what.
No. Our website doesn't have much.
Okay.
Our website is pretty limited, and
That's why we're doing the app.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll end it there.
But Sam, I'm sure you've done this, Sam, already, but Wayne's point about coordinating the information through this app with the 78th Precinct Council, I mean, because that's all real-time, helpful stuff. They're already doing it.
We meet once a week religiously, and they say exactly what's going on, because we are being squeezed now. There is almost no room for error. Everybody has to know. There's no parking, there's no. Right.
Peter.
Just to build on that a little bit, there's definitely a shortfall of space for the arena to operate and for everything else that's unfolding. I mean, one of the things that, just to keep this really brief, one of the things that we really would like from the community perspective is if events are going to spill out in the street, whether through operations or through some kind of any kind of commercially associated event, then we'd like you to work with the city, and also hopefully the board is involved in this, as a way to kind of develop protocols around those kind of events. Like you mentioned MTV, that's a big version of that, but we also heard in the last meeting about all the buses we did some other events. I think Tommy had noticed who's on site for concerns, maybe the app takes care of that, but also I think just keeping in mind that it is an onerous thing to actually take space from the public space and do it for operations. I'm really happy to hear that you're going to, it sounded to me like you're talking about doing typical events, which mean they don't come out. And I think that's prudent in the context of all of the stuff that's being removed, and I think you said 6 bays in the arena itself. I mean, that kind of scale requires a kind of administration of events that hopefully doesn't come out into the public that much. You know? So working with the city and the community together in concert to move forward and get some kind of clear idea of how things can lay out would be great.
Thanks, Peter. I think Jim has a point, yeah?
It's not related to this at all.
All right. Well, does anyone have anything related to this while Terrence is still standing by his PowerPoint? Okay. Terrence, tthank you very much. And now, Marion, with your consent, I think we'll try to wrap up with just, again, if there are things that were not on the agenda, I promise this, we only have about a couple minutes left, but Jim's got something. Now's a good chance for directors and or members of the public to raise final issues.
This will probably need to be discussed at the next meeting. The senator is concerned about the hundreds of people who, when they were displaced, were given the right to return to the project as the housing comes online. This is not an obligation. The obligation may operationally fall to Forest City, Greenland, but it is a state obligation.
Right.
And so she's writing to the head of ESD. And who else do you think she's writing to? It'll all be, you know.
I think if she writes to Howard,
that would be
we'll all see it.
That's the starting point, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, there's technical things like, do we even know who they all are, where they are? Have they been apprised of their right to return, and what is the current projected schedule for returning these families as the residences are built?
Marion, can we take the senator's questions, back to the office? Can you all look at that and
because
provide an answer?
Like, I can tell you that you're dealing from a false premise. Okay. So we need to talk about who displaced, who has the right to return.
We'll be more than happy to. We'll be more than happy to speak to what.
Go back to the agreements.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, the agreements. Look at how things were filed, how we're charted.
Manage expectations. Right. Good.
And we'll be more than happy to speak with Bertha and with Forest City, Greenland. Once we get the letter.
Thank you. Other items.
Sure,
once it's done.
Yeah.
Great. Other items. Anything else anyone would like to raise this afternoon? Gib.
I just wanted to come back to the subject of the app that was discussed before. Personally, I am very encouraged by the way this sounds. I think it could be one of the things that would be perhaps most effective in making a meaningful dent in quality of life impacts that are being experienced by people who live around the project. In addition to the stakeholders being the community and the stakeholders being ESDC, there was also some discussion about city agencies being involved and hopefully discussion about the folks from Greenland Forest City Partners being involved too, because one of the visions of setting up AYCDC is the idea that the agency would help facilitate communications and collaboration among all of the agencies, the state, and the developers on the project. And I think this initiative has the opportunity to do that. I would very much like to be able to see that come to fruition. So to the extent that they can be involved early on, I think that would be very, very helpful. And I think there's some pretty compelling incentives, especially for Greenland Forest City to get involved with this, because as the units in the project start becoming occupied, those tenants, I believe, will become the biggest users of this application. There'll be 13,500 of them eventually, and I think they will. I'm not joking. I mean, I think they all will be very, very ready customers for this application. So I think it makes a lot of sense to get to sort of plan for that in advance as well with the folks from Forest City.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you. Good. Anybody have anything else? Well, if not, thank you, directors, for your time and attention, to all of our ESD staff and colleagues, to Regina, to our friends from the community and our many partners. Do I have a motion, please, to adjourn? Is there a second? Okay. Good. Done. Thank you.